Midday sunlight flooded the Grayson kitchen, casting golden warmth across countertops and the cheerful chaos of lunchtime. 3-year-old Ella giggled in her high chair, her small hands reaching eagerly toward the colorful bowl Bianca held. The nanny smiled, spoon in hand, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. The scene radiated normalcy, father working nearby, child content, caregiver attentive. But on the floor near the pantry something had shifted. Rex lay still, body stretched across the tiles, but his posture told a different story. His ears stood rigid, perfectly aligned forward. His dark eyes had locked onto Bianca's hands with an intensity Michael recognized instantly, the same razor-sharp focus the German Shepherd had once used to detect hidden threats in hostile territory. It was the look that preceded every successful alert during his years as a police K-9. The look that had never been wrong. Michael Grayson paused mid-keystroke at his laptop, glancing toward the kitchen. The domestic peace felt suddenly fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Rex's gaze never wavered from the nanny's movements, tracking each gesture as she stirred the bowl, lifted the spoon, brought it toward Ella's waiting mouth. The dog's breathing had changed, slower, more controlled, the measured calm before decisive action. For months, Michael had rationalized this behavior. Rex was adjusting. Rex was overprotective. Rex was jealous of the attention Bianca gave Ella. But deep in his chest, in the place where soldiers' instincts lived even after the uniform came off, Michael felt the first whisper of warning. Something was wrong. Buzz had been trying to tell him for weeks. He just hadn't been willing to listen. The moment stretched, suspended in amber light and false security. Bianca's hand moved closer to Ella's mouth. Rex's muscles coiled beneath his fur. And the fragile calm that had defined their household for 3 months began to crack, revealing the hidden danger that would pull them all into a storm none of them saw coming, except for the 4-legged guardian who had been watching, waiting, and preparing to act when words could no longer protect the child he was sworn to defend. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now let's get into the story. The suburban streets of Maplewood carried the quiet rhythm of ordinary American life. Mothers pushed strollers along tree-lined sidewalks. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns. In the evenings, the smell of grilled burgers drifted between houses while children's laughter echoed from backyards. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved to each other, where doors stayed unlocked during the day, where trust was the default setting. Inside the 2-story colonial at the corner of Maple and Birch, Michael Grayson had built a life around that trust, and it was slowly killing his judgment. He stood at the kitchen counter now, laptop open to lines of security code that blurred together as his daughter's voice pulled his attention away. Ella sat in her high chair, legs swinging beneath the tray, singing a nonsense song about butterflies and cookies. At 3 years old, she had her mother's bright eyes and infectious joy, the kind that could light up a room or shatter a grieving father's careful composure with a single smile. Cancer had taken Rebecca 18 months ago. The diagnosis came fast, the decline faster. One day they were planning Ella's 2nd birthday party. 6 months later, Michael was standing alone at a funeral, holding a toddler who kept asking when mommy was coming home. The grief had been crushing, but he'd pushed through it the way his cybersecurity training taught him to push through complex problems, methodically, practically, one day at a time. He'd left his office job to work remotely. He'd learned to braid hair, badly, mastered the art of negotiating with a stubborn preschooler, and discovered that mac and cheese could be a food group if you added frozen peas. But most importantly, he'd found Bianca Santos through a highly rated local nanny agency. She'd arrived like an answer to prayers he hadn't known how to form. Professional, warm, endlessly patient with Ella's tantrums and boundless energy. For 3 months, Bianca had been the missing piece that made their broken household function again. On the floor near the pantry, Rex lifted his head and studied the scene with amber eyes that missed nothing. The German Shepherd was 65 pounds of lean muscle and battle-tested instincts. A retired police K-9 Michael had adopted 2 years ago after Rex's handler retired from the force. The dog had served with distinction, specializing in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. Scars marked his muzzle and shoulders, souvenirs from incidents Michael didn't like to imagine. In their home, Rex had become Ella's shadow and guardian. He followed her from room to room, positioned himself between her and strangers at the park, slept outside her bedroom door every night. When Rebecca was dying, Rex had sensed it before the doctors confirmed it, staying pressed against her hospital bed with that same watchful intensity he now directed at Bianca. The nanny moved through the kitchen with easy familiarity, pulling ingredients from cabinets she'd organized herself, humming along to Ella's made-up song. She wore a blue cardigan over a simple blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested danger. Nothing about her behavior over 3 months had raised any flags with the agency, with Michael, or with the neighbors who occasionally saw her at the playground with Ella. Nothing except Rex. From the first day Bianca arrived, the German Shepherd had watched her with an intensity that made Michael uncomfortable. Not aggressive, Rex never growled, never bared teeth, never made a threatening move. But he never relaxed either. His gaze tracked her across rooms. His body positioned itself between her and Ella at every opportunity. When Bianca reached for the child, Rex's ears would flatten slightly, and his breathing would change in that particular way Michael had learned to recognize during their brief time working together with the police IT systems. It was the posture of a K9 who had detected something dangerous. Michael had dismissed it. He'd needed to dismiss it, because accepting Rex's warning meant accepting that he'd let a threat into his home, into his daughter's life. It meant admitting that his judgment, already shaken by loss and loneliness, had failed in the most crucial way possible. So he'd explained away the dog's behavior with rational arguments. Rex was territorial. Rex was adjusting to a new person in the house. Rex had simply been trained to be suspicious of everyone. But in quiet moments, usually late at night when Ella was asleep and the house was still, Michael's professional mind would turn over the inconsistencies. The way Rex never alerted to the mailman, the neighbors, or the delivery drivers who came to the door. The way the dog had immediately accepted Rebecca's sister when she visited, even seeking affection from her. The way Rex's entire demeanor changed when Bianca was present versus when she was gone, as if the dog was constantly working, constantly analyzing a threat only he could detect. Michael pushed the thoughts away again now, focusing on his laptop screen. Lines of code needed review before the end of the day. Client security protocols didn't pause for parental anxiety or canine behavior quirks. "Daddy, look," Ella called, holding up her plastic spoon like a trophy. "I can make it spin." Michael glanced over and smiled despite himself. "That's amazing, sweetheart. You're getting so good with your spoon." Bianca laughed softly from her position at the counter, where she was preparing Ella's lunch. "She's growing up so fast," she said, her voice carrying that warm, nurturing tone that had convinced Michael she was exactly what Ella needed. "Pretty soon she won't need our help at all." The words should have brought comfort. Instead, something about the phrasing, "our help," made Michael's fingers pause over the keyboard. He looked up again, watching as Bianca pulled a bowl from the cabinet and began spooning in rice and mixed vegetables from containers in the refrigerator. On the floor, Rex rose to his feet. Not quickly but deliberately, each movement controlled and purposeful. He patted across the kitchen tile, nails clicking softly, and positioned himself near Ella's high chair. His body faced Bianca. His gaze never left her hands. Michael recognized the posture now, really recognized it, perhaps for the first time since Bianca had started. It was the exact stance Rex had held the day they toured the police K9 training facility together, when the handler had hidden contraband in a mock apartment and asked Rex to find it. The dog had moved through the space systematically, checking each area, until he'd frozen in front of a cabinet with that same focused intensity. When the handler opened the cabinet, drugs were inside. Rex had been right. Rex was always right. Michael's pulse quickened. He closed his laptop slowly, not wanting to draw attention to the shift in his awareness. His analytical mind, the same mind that detected security vulnerabilities in complex systems, began cataloging observations he'd been too grief-stricken and desperate to notice before. The way Bianca always prepared Ella's meals alone, insisting Michael focus on his work. The way she became slightly flustered the few times Michael had offered to help in the kitchen during lunch. The way Ella had seemed unusually drowsy several afternoons after meals, sleeping far longer than her normal nap time. The way Bianca had explained it away as growth spurts and energy crashes, and Michael had accepted the explanation because he wanted to believe her. The way Rex had never, not once, eaten food from Bianca's hands, even when she tried to give him treats. Bianca stirred the bowl now, her back to Michael, her movements casual and practiced. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small container, vitamin powder, she'd said weeks ago, something she added to picky eaters' meals to boost nutrition. Michael had nodded absently, grateful she was so thorough. But as she opened the container and tapped something into the bowl, Michael caught a glimpse of the label. Not the colorful, professional packaging of children's vitamins. Something else. Something that made his cybersecurity training scream that data didn't match expected patterns. Rex's body tensed. His weight shifted forward onto his front legs, the exact stance that preceded an alert or an intervention. Every muscle in the dog's frame had coiled with purpose. Michael's mouth went dry. He wanted to call out, to ask what Bianca was adding, but some instinct, the same survival instinct that had kept him alive in digital warfare simulations, the same instinct he'd been suppressing for months, told him to wait, to watch, to gather information before revealing his suspicion. Bianca stirred the bowl one more time, then turned toward Ella with a smile that looked warm and genuine. "Okay, sweetie," she said in that sing-song voice. "Time for lunch. I made your favorite." She lifted a spoonful of the mixture, steam rising gently from the rice and vegetables. Ella opened her mouth eagerly, trusting and innocent and completely unaware of the tension crackling through the room like static electricity. Rex's breathing changed. Michael heard it from across the kitchen, the slow, controlled exhale of AK-9 preparing to act. And in that suspended moment, as Bianca's hand moved the spoon toward Ella's waiting mouth, Michael Grayson finally understood what his loyal partner had been trying to tell him for 3 months. Something was catastrophically wrong. His daughter was in danger. And he had been too blind, too desperate, too broken by loss to see it, until now when the fragile piece he'd built was about to shatter in a way that would change everything. Rex's muscles coiled tighter. Bianca's hand moved closer. Ella's mouth stayed open, trusting. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, domesticity and danger occupying the same sunlit space, waiting for the violence that would finally tear away the veil of normalcy and expose the truth lurking beneath the surface of ordinary suburban life. The truth that Rex had known from the very beginning. The truth that was about to explode across their kitchen floor in the span of a single decisive heartbeat. The spoon rose in a smooth arc, steam curling from the colorful mixture of rice and vegetables. Bianca's smile remained fixed in place, warm and practiced as she brought the food toward Ella's waiting mouth. "Here comes the airplane," she sang softly, making the spoon dip and sway. "Open wide for landing." Ella giggled, her small hands gripping the edges of her high-chair tray. Her mouth opened in anticipation, ready to receive the bite that had been prepared with such careful attention. Sunlight caught the metal spoon, making it gleam. Michael watched from his position at the counter, laptop forgotten, every instinct suddenly screaming that something fundamental had shifted in the room. His eyes moved from Bianca's hand to Rex, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The German shepherd's entire body had transformed. Gone was the casual watchfulness, the patient observation. Rex's muscles had bunched beneath his fur with the coiled tension of a spring compressed to its breaking point. His ears flattened against his skull. His lips pulled back just slightly, not in aggression, but in the focused intensity of a working dog who had identified his target. His dark eyes had locked onto the spoon with laser precision, tracking its movement through the air with the same unwavering focus he'd once used to track explosives across hostile terrain. Michael recognized the posture. It was the exact stance Rex had held seconds before apprehending a suspect who'd tried to flee during a raid. The moment before controlled violence became necessary. The instant before training overrode every other instinct and transformed a loyal companion into a precision instrument of intervention. "Bianca, wait," Michael started, pushing away from the counter. But Rex had already committed. The shepherd launched himself forward in one explosive surge of muscle and purpose. There was no warning bark, no growl, no theatrical display. Just pure, calculated action. His powerful legs drove him across the kitchen tile in 3 bounding strides, closing the distance between his position and the high chair with breathtaking speed. His body moved with the practiced efficiency of AK-9 who had performed similar interventions countless times under far more dangerous circumstances. Time seemed to fracture. Michael saw it unfold in crystal clear detail. Rex's trajectory, the shock forming on Bianca's face, Ella's expression shifting from delight to confusion. The spoon hung suspended in the air, inches from his daughter's mouth, carrying whatever substance Bianca had stirred into the innocent-looking meal. Rex's muzzle struck the bowl with surgical precision. The impact was controlled but devastating. The bowl launched from Bianca's hands as if propelled by an explosion, spinning through the air and spraying its contents across the kitchen in a wide arc, rice scattered like shrapnel. Vegetables hit the floor, the counter, the cabinet doors. The ceramic bowl shattered against the tile with a sharp crack that made Michael flinch. Food splattered across Bianca's blue cardigan, across the high-chair tray, across Rex's face and chest. But the spoon fell clean, clattering to the floor near the pantry, its contents spilling across the tile in a pale, glistening puddle. Ella's scream pierced the chaos. High-pitched and terrified, her voice cracked with the pure shock of violence erupting in her safe space. Her small body jerked backward in the high chair, hands flying up to her face, tears already streaming down her cheeks. She didn't understand what had happened, only that the warm, happy moment had exploded into confusion and noise, and her father's dog had done something that shattered everything. Bianca stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the counter. Food dripped from her cardigan and splattered across her neat ponytail. Her face cycled through expressions too quickly to read: shock, fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like panic. Not the panic of someone who'd been frightened by an animal. The panic of someone whose carefully constructed plan had just been destroyed. "What the hell?" she shouted, her voice rising to a pitch Michael had never heard from her before. The warm, nurturing tone was gone, replaced by something sharp and raw. "Michael, your dog just attacked me. He's insane." Michael stood frozen, his mind trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Rex hadn't attacked Bianca. The dog had been close enough to bite her hand, her arm, her torso. He could have inflicted serious damage in the split second of his lunge. But he hadn't touched her. Not once. His entire focus had been on the bowl, on the food, on preventing whatever was in that spoon from reaching Ella's mouth. Rex now stood near the scattered mess, his body still tense but controlled. His muzzle dripped with rice and sauce. His dark eyes moved between the spilled food and Bianca with that same unwavering focus, as if confirming his assessment, verifying his decision to act. "He didn't attack you," Michael heard himself say, his voice strange and distant. "He went for the food." "The food?" Bianca's laugh came out brittle and high. "Are you serious right now? Look at this." She gestured at the destroyed kitchen, at Ella still crying in her high chair, at the shattered bowl. "He could have hurt Ella. He could have hurt me. This is exactly what I've been afraid would happen. That dog is unstable, Michael. He's dangerous." Ella's cries had shifted from shock to genuine distress. "Daddy," she wailed, reaching for him with grasping hands. "Daddy's scared." The kitchen had become a crime scene, though Michael couldn't yet articulate what crime had been committed. Ella's sobs had quieted to hiccuping whimpers against his shoulder, but the damage was done. Through the window, he watched Mrs. Patterson gesturing animatedly to Mr. Chen from 3 doors down, both of them staring toward the Grayson house with expressions that mixed concern and vindication. Bianca stood near the sink, phone still clutched in her hand, rice and vegetables staining her cardigan like evidence of assault. Her face had shifted into something Michael had never seen before, harder, more calculating beneath the surface performance of fear. She wiped at her sleeve with deliberate visible movements, making sure he could see the mess, the violation, the proof of what she was claiming had happened. "Animal control is on their way," she said, her voice carrying just the right tremor of trauma. "I also spoke with the police. They said someone already called about the noise." Her eyes met Michael's, and for a fraction of a second he saw something flash there. Challenge maybe. Or warning. "I told them what happened. How that dog attacked me while I was caring for a child. How he's been aggressive since I started working here." "Rex hasn't been aggressive," Michael said carefully, adjusting Ella's weight in his arms. His daughter had stopped crying but kept her face buried against his neck, her small fingers gripping his shirt. "He's been watchful. There's a difference." "Watchful." Bianca's laugh came out sharp. "Michael, he just launched himself at me. He destroyed the lunch I prepared. He terrified Ella. If that's not aggression, I don't know what is." She gestured toward Rex, who remained near the scattered food, his posture unchanged. "Look at him. He's not even sorry. He's just sitting there like he did nothing wrong." Michael did look. Rex sat with perfect discipline, his body angled toward the mess on the floor, his dark eyes moving between specific spots in the scattered rice and vegetables. His tail was still. His ears remained forward and alert. And every few seconds, a soft whine emerged from his throat, not distress, not submission, but something else entirely. Recognition jolted through Michael's chest. He'd heard that exact sound before, during the tour of the K9 training facility. The handler had explained it was an alert behavior, a way for the dog to communicate a positive detection when circumstances prevented the usual sit-and-stare response. Rex was telling him something. The dog was trying to communicate in the only language he had. "There's something wrong with the food. Look at the food. I found it. Pay attention." "He needs to be quarantined," Bianca continued, her voice rising again. "Evaluated by professionals. I'm not coming back to this house until that animal is removed. I can't work in these conditions, Michael. I won't put myself at risk like this." A knock at the front door punctured the tension. Heavy official. Michael's stomach tightened. "I'll get it," he said quietly, carrying Ella with him as he moved toward the hallway. Rex rose immediately, following 3 paces behind with the precision of a trained escort. Bianca stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, playing the role of victim too shaken to face the authorities. Michael opened the door to find Officer Brennan, a younger cop he'd seen around the neighborhood, and Mrs. Patterson standing just behind him on the front walk, her face flushed with the excitement of being involved in genuine drama. "Mr. Grayson," Brennan said with professional courtesy, "we received a call about a dog attack. Is everyone all right?" "There wasn't an attack," Michael started, but Mrs. Patterson cut him off. "That's not what I heard," she said, stepping forward despite Brennan's subtle gesture for her to stay back. "I heard screaming. That child screaming. And I've been saying for months that dog is dangerous. He growls every time I walk past your house. He's aggressive, officer. I've witnessed it myself." Michael felt his jaw tighten. "Rex has never growled at you, Mrs. Patterson. He's never shown aggression toward anyone in this neighborhood." "I know what I've heard," she insisted, her chin lifting with righteous certainty. "German Shepherds are dangerous dogs. Police don't retire them unless there's something wrong with them. And now he's attacked the nanny. Who knows what he'll do next? What if it's a child next time?" "Rex didn't attack anyone," Michael said, forcing his voice to stay level. Alice stirred against his shoulder, her fingers tightening in his shirt. "The nanny wasn't injured. The dog knocked food out of her hands. That's all." Brennan's expression remained neutral, but Michael saw him glance down at Rex, who sat calmly at Michael's side, showing none of the agitation or aggression one would expect from a supposedly dangerous animal. "I'll need to speak with the nanny and get her statement. And animal control is already en route. They'll need to examine the dog, verify vaccinations, assess behavior." "Of course," Michael said, though his mind was racing. Once animal control arrived, once Bianca gave her statement, once Mrs. Patterson spread her version of events through the neighborhood, the narrative would cement. Rex would be branded dangerous. There would be quarantine periods, behavioral evaluations, possibly even a court order for removal. And through it all, Michael would lose the chance to understand what had actually happened in that kitchen. Brennan moved past him into the house, heading toward the kitchen where Bianca waited. Michael heard her voice rise in greeting, already launching into her account of the incident. "Officer, thank God you're here. I was so frightened. That dog came out of nowhere." Michael stayed in the hallway, Ella heavy in his arms, Rex pressed against his leg. Mr. Chin had joined Mrs. Patterson on the front walk now, both of them speaking in low voices and glancing toward the house. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Brennan taking notes while Bianca gestured, her movements emphasizing her distress, her vulnerability, the danger she'd been exposed to. But Michael's analytical mind, the part of him trained to find vulnerabilities and spot inconsistencies, was finally overriding the desperate need to believe everything was fine. He replayed the incident frame by frame, the way he'd replay security footage looking for the moment a breach occurred. Rex's trajectory. The precision of his strike. The way he targeted only the bowl, only the food, despite being close enough to bite Bianca's hands, her arms, her torso. The way his teeth never made contact with her skin. The way he'd maintained perfect control even in the explosive violence of his lunge. That wasn't an attack. That was an intervention. The German Shepherd at his side whined softly again, the sound cutting through Michael's thoughts. He looked down to find Rex staring up at him with those dark, intelligent eyes, waiting with the patient intensity of a partner trying to communicate across a language barrier. "Look at the food. Check the food. I found it." A white animal control van pulled up to the curb, and Michael's window of opportunity began closing. Once they took Rex away for observation, once the official processes began, any evidence of what the dog had actually detected would be lost in the chaos of bureaucracy and procedure. Michael made a decision. "Officer Brennan," he called toward the kitchen, keeping his voice calm and cooperative. "I need to put Ella down for a nap. She's had a shock. I'll be right back to give my statement." He didn't wait for permission. He carried his daughter upstairs, Rex trailing behind despite Brennan's call for the dog to stay. In Ella's room, he laid her gently on her toddler bed, pulling her favorite blanket over her small body. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Is Rex in trouble?" she asked in a small voice. "No, sweetheart," Michael said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. Rex was trying to help. "He's a good dog." He kissed her forehead. "Try to rest. Daddy will be right downstairs." He closed the door most of the way and moved quickly to the upstairs hall closet where he kept emergency supplies, including clean Ziploc bags and a small evidence collection kit he'd assembled during his brief time consulting with law enforcement on cybersecurity. Old habits from that world carried forward into civilian life. He'd never imagined actually needing them. Downstairs, voices rose and fell. Bianca's dramatic recounting. Mrs. Patterson's corroborating testimony about Rex's supposed aggression. The crackle of a radio as the animal control officer arrived and consulted with Brennan. Michael descended the stairs with the bags hidden in his pocket, Rex still at his side. As he reached the first floor, he saw the animal control officer in the hallway, a woman in her 40s with a tired expression and a loop pole in her hand. "Mr. Grayson? I'm Officer Valdez. I need to take custody of the dog for a 48-hour observation period. Standard procedure in cases of reported attacks." He didn't attack anyone, Michael said automatically, but he saw it was pointless. The machinery of bureaucracy was already in motion. "That's for the behavioral assessment to determine," Valdez said, not unkindly. "If you could secure the dog, we'll transport him to the facility. You'll receive documentation of where he's being held and the procedures for evaluation." Michael felt Rex lean more heavily against his leg, the dog's trust absolute even as the humans around him made decisions that would tear him away from his family. It broke something in Michael's chest. "Can I have 5 minutes?" he asked. "To clean up the kitchen before you take him? There's food everywhere. It's a slip hazard." Valdez glanced at Brennan, who shrugged. "5 minutes," she said. "But the dog stays in sight." Michael moved into the kitchen where Bianca had retreated to the far counter, maintaining distance from Rex while still playing the role of victim. Rice and vegetables still scattered across the floor. The fallen spoon lay near the pantry. And the puddle of spilled food glistened under the overhead lights, carrying that faint chemical scent Michael had finally identified. He grabbed paper towels, crouching near the mess with Rex sitting calmly beside him. Brennan watched from the doorway, Valdez standing just behind him. But neither was close enough to see Michael's hands as he worked. He wiped up the visible mess, dropping contaminated paper towels into the trash. But his other hand, shielded by his body, carefully scooped samples of the spilled food into the Ziploc bags in his pocket. Rice grains, vegetable pieces, and most importantly, the pale residue from the puddle near the spoon, whatever substance had been stirred into Ella's lunch, leaving that telltale chemical smell that finally made sense of Rex's 3 months of unwavering vigilance. The German shepherd whined softly once more, his nose pointing at the exact spots Michael was sampling. "Yes, there. That's what I found. That's what I've been trying to tell you." "Time's up," Valdez called from the doorway. "I need to take the dog now." Michael stood slowly, the bag sealed and hidden in his pocket, evidence secured. He met Rex's eyes and saw perfect trust there, perfect confidence that his partner would understand, would act, would do what needed to be done. "I'm sorry, boy," Michael whispered, his hand resting on Rex's head for what might be the last time. "I should have listened sooner." Valdez moved forward with the loophole, and Rex went docilely without resistance, as if he'd completed his mission and was now willing to accept whatever consequences came next. Because he'd done his job. He'd protected his family. He'd stopped the threat. And now it was Michael's turn to prove that trust hadn't been misplaced. The house felt hollow after the animal control van pulled away, Rex's silhouette visible through the rear window until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared. Michael stood on the front walk, the afternoon sun warm on his face, while neighbors lingered on their lawns pretending not to stare. Mrs. Patterson had finally retreated to her own house, satisfied that justice was being served. Officer Brennan had left 20 minutes earlier, incident report completed, warning issued. 48 hours. That's what Valdez had said. 48 hours to provide proof of vaccinations, proof of previous training certification, and a written statement explaining why Rex shouldn't be classified as a dangerous animal requiring permanent restraint or removal from the home. Michael's hand moved to his pocket, feeling the sealed bags there. Evidence if he was right. Paranoid delusion if he was wrong. Inside, Bianca was gathering her things from the kitchen, her movements quick and efficient. The warm, nurturing nanny who'd been part of their routine for 3 months had been replaced by someone cooler, more distant. She'd changed out of the stained cardigan into a spare shirt she kept in her bag, and now she was wiping down the counter with methodical precision, erasing the last traces of the incident. "I'm leaving for the day," she announced when Michael entered. Her voice carried none of its usual warmth. "I think it's best if we all have some space to process what happened. Bianca, I'm sorry about." "Don't apologize for the dog," she cut him off, her tone sharp. "Apologize for putting me in danger. For making me work in an environment where I could have been seriously hurt. She slung her canvas bag over her shoulder. I'll be in touch about whether I'm comfortable continuing this position. Right now, I need to think about my own safety. Michael watched her move toward the door, his analytical mind cataloging details he'd missed before. The way her eyes avoided the area where the food had spilled. The slight tremor in her hands that didn't quite match the confident anger in her voice. The way she paused at the threshold, as if calculating her next move rather than simply leaving in justified outrage. Of course, he said carefully. Take all the time you need. She left without another word, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt final. Through the window, Michael watched her walk to her sedan parked on the street, watched her sit in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, watched her pull away with the deliberate slowness of someone trying to appear calm. Only when her car disappeared around the same corner that had swallowed the animal control van did Michael allow himself to move. He climbed the stairs quickly, checking on Ella first. She'd fallen asleep despite the trauma, her small body curled around her stuffed turtle, her breathing deep and even. The resilience of children, Michael thought, gently closing her door. They could survive chaos that would break adults as long as they felt safe afterward. But was she safe? That was the question burning through his mind as he descended to the kitchen, pulled on latex gloves from under the sink, and began his real work. The samples in his pocket were a start, but not enough. Years of cybersecurity consulting had taught him that evidence needed context, documentation, chain of custody. A single data point meant nothing. Patterns told the story. He pulled out his phone and began photographing the kitchen from multiple angles. The scattered food that hadn't been cleaned. The exact position where the bowl had shattered. The spot near the pantry where Rex had focused his attention. He used a ruler from Ella's art supplies to provide scale, placed markers where key elements had landed. Each photo was time-stamped, geotagged, methodically organized. His hands trembled as he worked, adrenaline and fear making his movements less precise than he wanted. What if he was wrong? What if Rex had simply snapped, the way even good dogs sometimes did, and Michael was constructing an elaborate conspiracy to avoid accepting the truth? What if this was just grief and loneliness making him paranoid, seeing threats where none existed because the alternative was admitting he'd failed to protect his daughter by trusting the wrong person? But then he crouched near the pantry, examining the area Rex had been alerting to, and the chemical smell hit him again. Stronger now that he was paying attention. Not unpleasant exactly, but artificial. Wrong. The kind of smell that didn't belong in home-cooked rice and vegetables. He pulled out the Ziploc bags and examined their contents under the kitchen light. The rice grains looked normal. The vegetables looked normal. But there, in the pale residue from the spilled liquid, he could see a faint chalky texture mixed with the sauce. Powder that hadn't fully dissolved, leaving traces of white against the deeper brown. Flavor enhancer for picky eaters. That's what Bianca had said weeks ago when he'd noticed her adding something to Ella's meals. He'd accepted the explanation because it made sense, because he wanted Ella to eat healthy food, because trusting Bianca was easier than questioning her. Michael found a clean glass container in the cabinet and carefully transferred the contents of the Ziploc bags, sealing each sample with tape and labeling them with marker. Sample 1 rice, sample 2 vegetables, sample 3 liquid residue. He photographed each container, documenting the transfer. Then he sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, and began searching through the nanny cam footage he'd installed when Bianca started. He'd set it up for security for peace of mind, but had rarely reviewed the recordings. Life was busy. Ella seemed happy. Bianca seemed competent. There'd been no reason to watch. Now he scrolled back through days of footage, watching meal preparations and fast forward. Breakfast, lunch, snacks. Bianca moving through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, talking to Ella, singing songs, making food appear nutritious and appealing. And there, Michael's breath caught. There it was. Tuesday 3 days ago. Bianca preparing lunch while Michael was upstairs on a conference call. She pulled out the small container, the one she'd claimed held vitamins or flavor enhancer. She opened it, tapped something into Ella's bowl, stirred carefully. The powder left a faint chalky residue on the spoon before she rinsed it quickly under the tap. Michael scrolled further back. Friday 6 days ago. The same motion, the same container. Thursday before that. Monday. He went back through 2 weeks of footage and the pattern emerged with damning clarity. Every time Michael was out of the kitchen, every time he was distracted by work or phone calls, Bianca added something to Ella's food from that unmarked container. Not vitamins. Not flavor enhancer. Something else. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister checking in, asking how Ella was doing. Michael ignored it, his mind racing through options. He could go to the police now, show them the footage, the samples, explain his suspicions. But what did he actually have? Video of a nanny adding what could legitimately be supplements to a child's food. Samples of spilled lunch that might test negative for anything suspicious. The word of a grieving single father desperate to believe his dog was hero rather than a liability. They'd dismiss him. Or worse, they'd investigate slowly through official channels, while Bianca disappeared and evidence vanished and Rex remained quarantined under suspicion of being dangerous. No. Michael needed proof first. Real, undeniable, scientific proof that would force the authorities to act. He pulled up his phone contacts, scrolling past recent numbers to names he hadn't called in months. His former life, before Rebecca got sick, before he became a full-time single father. Colleagues from his cybersecurity consulting days, people who'd moved on to different careers, different cities. He found the name he was looking for, Dr. Sarah Chin. They'd worked together 5 years ago on a project securing medical databases for a hospital network. Sarah had been the lead cybersecurity architect, brilliant and meticulous, someone who thought in layers of verification and proof. But she'd left the field 2 years ago, burned out by the corporate grind, pursuing a long-delayed passion for forensic science. Michael remembered the email she'd sent announcing her career change, her acceptance into a toxicology program. He opened his laptop and searched for her. There, Dr. Sarah Chin, forensic toxicologist, operating a private consulting lab in the city 40 minutes away. She specialized in analytical chemistry, drug testing, poison detection. Exactly what he needed. Michael's finger hovered over the call button. It was almost 6 p.m. She might not answer. She might not remember him. She might think he was crazy. He pressed dial. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, professional and slightly distracted. Dr. Chin. Sarah, it's Michael Grayson. I don't know if you remember me, we worked together on the MedSecure project back in. Michael, of course I remember. Her tone warmed slightly. How are you? I heard about Rebecca. I'm so sorry. The sympathy in her voice made Michael's throat tighten, but he pushed past it. Thank you. Listen, I need help. Professional help. I have samples I need tested urgently, and I can't go through official channels yet. It's complicated. Pause. He could hear the sound of papers shuffling, a door closing. What kind of samples? Food. That I suspect has been contaminated with some kind of sedative or medication. It's a child endangerment situation, but I need proof before I can involve the police. Another pause, longer this time. Michael, if there's a child in danger, you need to call the authorities now. The child is my daughter, he said quietly, and I'm trying to protect her. But I need evidence, Sarah. Real evidence. Not just suspicion and fear. He heard her exhale slowly. Tell me what happened. Michael explained quickly, Rex's intervention, the spilled food, the chemical smell, the patterns in the nanny cam footage. He kept his voice level, factual, presenting the information the way he'd present a security vulnerability to a client. Just data. Just observations. Let her draw her own conclusions. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for several seconds. You have samples secured? Yes. Properly contained, documented, photographed with chain of custody preserved. And you think this nanny has been drugging your daughter? I think my dog detected something in the food that shouldn't be there. I think he's been trying to warn me for months. And I think I need to know what that something is before she has a chance to destroy evidence or disappear. Bring them to my lab, Sarah said, her voice shifting into professional mode. Tonight, if possible. I can run preliminary tests immediately. If there's anything suspicious, we'll know within hours. Relief flooded through Michael's chest. Thank you. I'll be there in an hour. Michael, Sarah said before he could hang up, if these samples test positive for anything dangerous, we go to the police immediately. No delays, no trying to handle this yourself. Agreed. Agreed. He ended the call and sat for a moment in the quiet kitchen, the samples in front of him, Ella sleeping upstairs, Rex's absence of physical ache in his chest. 48 hours to prove his dog wasn't dangerous. 48 hours to either vindicate his instincts or accept that grief had broken his judgment completely. Michael gathered the samples carefully, placed them in a small cooler with ice packs, and carried it to his car. He woke Ella gently, strapped her into her car seat with her stuffed turtle, and pulled out of the driveway as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Mrs. Patterson watched from her window as they passed. Michael didn't wave. The drive to the city took 43 minutes. Ella dozed in the back seat, exhausted from crying and confusion. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, his mind running through scenarios, possibilities, outcomes. If Sarah found nothing, he'd have to accept that Rex had simply snapped. He'd lose his dog, lose Bianca's help, and face the neighborhood's judgment as the man whose dangerous animal attacked an innocent woman. But if Sarah found something, if the samples revealed what Rex's nose had detected, then everything changed. Then his dog became a hero. Then Bianca became a threat. Then the real investigation could begin. The city lights appeared ahead, towers of glass and steel rising against the darkening sky. Michael's phone GPS directed him to an industrial area near the waterfront, where Sarah's private lab occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse. He parked, lifted Ella into his arms and grabbed the cooler. The building's entrance was unmarked except for a small placard listing tenants. He found Sarah's name and pressed the buzzer. "Come up," her voice crackled through the intercom. Second floor, end of the hall. The elevator was old and slow, giving Michael time to second-guess everything. What was he doing? Driving his daughter around the city with samples of possibly contaminated food, chasing a theory based on a dog's behavior? Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he was just a desperate man unable to accept reality. But then he remembered Rex's eyes, that perfect trust and certainty. The way the dog had sat near the spilled food, whining his alert. The precision of his intervention, targeting only the threat, never the person. The elevator doors opened. Michael carried Ella down a dimly lit hallway to a door marked, Chin Laboratory Services Private. He knocked. Sarah opened the door and Michael was struck by how little she'd changed. Still slight and precise, hair pulled back in a neat bun, dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She glanced at sleeping Ella, then at Michael's face, and something in her expression softened. "Come in," she said quietly. "Let's see what you've brought me." Michael stepped into the lab, into fluorescent light and the smell of chemicals and the beginning of answers. One way or another, in the next few hours, he'd know if he was a protective father or a delusional fool. Rex's future depended on which. So did Ella's life. Sarah's lab occupied a corner space with windows overlooking the industrial waterfront, though at this hour the view was reduced to scattered lights reflecting off dark water. The interior was exactly what Michael expected. Meticulously organized, every surface clean, equipment arranged with the precision of someone who understood that contamination could invalidate results. Glass-fronted cabinets held rows of chemical reagents. A fume hood hummed quietly in the corner. The sharp, sterile smell of laboratory disinfectant cut through the air. Ella stirred in Michael's arms as Sarah closed the door behind them, her small face scrunching before settling back into sleep. Sarah glanced at the child with an expression Michael couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or calculation about what kind of situation she was involving herself in. "There's a couch in the corner," Sarah said, gesturing to a small break area Michael hadn't noticed. "You can lay her down there. This might take a while." Michael carried Ella to the worn leather couch and settled her carefully, tucking her stuffed turtle under her arm. She sighed in her sleep, completely unaware that the next few hours might determine whether her father was paranoid or prescient. He stood watching her breathe for a moment, the steady rise and fall of her small chest, the innocence of her relaxed features, before turning back to Sarah. She'd already pulled on nitrile gloves and was examining the samples Michael had brought, holding each container up to the light with professional detachment. Her expression revealed nothing, but Michael noticed the way her fingers tightened slightly on the container holding the liquid residue. "Walk me through the collection process," she said, not looking up from the samples. "Exact timeline, handling procedures, storage conditions." Michael recounted the sequence of events. Rex's intervention at 12:47 p.m. according to the kitchen clock in the nanny cam footage, the chaos that followed, his covert collection of samples while animal control waited, the immediate sealing and refrigeration. Sarah asked precise questions about cross-contamination risks, about whether anyone else had touched the evidence, about the chain of custody from kitchen floor to her lab. "And you're certain the nanny added something to this food?" Sarah asked, finally setting down the samples and meeting his eyes. "This isn't just a dog reacting poorly to a new person? I have video footage of her adding an unmarked substance to Ella's meals repeatedly over the past 2 weeks, Michael said. "Every time I was out of the room. Always from the same small container. And Rex?" He paused, trying to find words for the certainty he'd felt in those amber eyes. "Rex was a decorated K9. He's never been wrong about a threat. Not once in his entire career." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Michael saw her making calculations that had nothing to do with chemistry. Weighing his credibility, his mental state, the likelihood that grief had compromised his judgment. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she nodded once and turned back to the samples. "Preliminary tests first," she said, moving to a workstation equipped with what looked like a small spectrometer. "I'll run screens for common adulterants, sedatives, antihistamines, anything that might be used to make a child drowsy or compliant. If we get hits, I'll do confirmatory testing with more sophisticated equipment." She worked with efficient precision, transferring minute portions of the samples to test tubes, adding reagents that changed color in response to chemical reactions Michael didn't understand. He watched her move between instruments, documenting each step with photographs and handwritten notes. The process was hypnotic in its methodical care: dilute, measure, heat, observe, record. "The liquid residue is most promising," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to Michael. If she added something to the food, the highest concentration would be in whatever liquid was present. She pipetted the tiny amount onto a test strip and waited, watching for color changes with the patience of someone accustomed to letting chemistry reveal its secrets slowly. Michael glanced at the wall clock. 8:47 p.m. 40 hours remaining until Animal Control's deadline. He pulled out his phone and checked for messages. Nothing from Bianca, 2 texts from his sister asking if everything was okay, a notification from the neighborhood app that Mrs. Patterson had posted about the dangerous dog incident on Maple Street. He put the phone away and watched Sarah work. By 9:30 she'd completed the initial screening battery. She stood at her workstation, staring at a series of test results spread across the counter, her expression unreadable. Michael's stomach tightened. "Sarah?" She looked up and her face had changed. Gone was the professional detachment, replaced by something harder. Anger maybe. Or disgust. "I need to run confirmatory tests," she said quietly. "But the preliminaries are showing positive hits for benzodiazepines and antihistamines. Multiple compounds." The words took a moment to penetrate. "You mean?" "I mean there are drugs in your daughter's food, Michael. Sedatives. The kind that would make a small child drowsy, compliant, and if dosed incorrectly could cause serious harm." She stripped off her gloves and pulled on a fresh pair, her movements sharp with controlled fury. "I'm running full analytical testing now. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with, specific compounds, concentrations, chemical fingerprints. That takes time and more sophisticated equipment." Michael felt the kitchen floor tilt beneath him, though he was standing in a lab 40 minutes from home. Rex had been right. For 3 months, the dog had been trying to warn him, and Michael had ignored every signal because accepting the warning meant accepting that he'd endangered his daughter through willful blindness. "How long?" he asked, his voice coming from somewhere far away. 2 hours minimum. Maybe 3. "I have to be thorough. If this goes to court, the analysis needs to be bulletproof." Sarah was already moving, loading samples into machines Michael couldn't identify. "Make yourself comfortable. There's coffee in the break room if you need it. This is going to be a long night." Michael couldn't sit. He paced the perimeter of the lab, checking on Ella every few minutes, watching Sarah work with instruments that hummed and beeped and processed evidence that would either vindicate his instincts or damn them. Around 10:15 his phone rang, Detective Wade following up on the incident report. Michael let it go to voicemail. Whatever he told the police now had to be backed by irrefutable proof, not just the father's suspicions. At 10:45, Sarah printed something from her computer and studied it with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. She made notes, cross-referenced something in a thick reference manual, then returned to her analysis without comment. Michael didn't ask. He'd worked with Sarah long enough to know she wouldn't share incomplete conclusions. Ella woke briefly around 11 o'clock, confused and asking for water. Michael found a clean cup in the break room, filled it from the filtered tap, and helped her drink while explaining in simple terms that Daddy had to visit a friend for work. She accepted this with the easy trust of a 3-year-old and curled back up on the couch, asleep again within minutes. The kind of trust Michael had extended to Bianca. The kind of trust that might have killed his daughter if Rex hadn't intervened. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah stepped back from her workstation and pulled off her gloves with a sharp snap. Her face was pale under the fluorescent lights, and when she turned to face Michael, he saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. "Sit down," she said. "Just tell me." "Michael, sit down." He lowered himself into a desk chair, his legs suddenly unreliable. Sarah picked up a printed report, held it for a moment as if weighing how much truth to deliver at once, then set it on the desk between them. The food samples contain crushed lorazepam, that's a benzodiazepine, a powerful sedative, and diphenhydramine, which is the active ingredient in Benadryl but at concentrations far higher than recommended for pediatric use. Sarah's voice had gone clinical, the way people spoke when delivering devastating news they needed to distance themselves from. The combination in these quantities would have caused severe sedation in a child Ella's size. Drowsiness, confusion, loss of coordination. At higher doses or with repeated exposure, respiratory depression, seizures, potentially death. Michael heard the words but couldn't process them into meaning. Lorazepam. Diphenhydramine. Sarah continued, her voice careful and precise. Based on the concentration in the liquid residue, I estimate each dose contained approximately 0.5 milligrams of lorazepam and 50 milligrams of diphenhydramine. For an adult, that might just cause drowsiness. For a child Ella's age and weight. She paused and Michael saw her jaw tighten. It's dangerous, Michael. One dose could have caused serious impairment. Multiple doses over time could have resulted in respiratory failure or neurological damage. She's been with us for 3 months, Michael said, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. Distant. Hello. I saw footage going back 2 weeks where she added something to Ella's food. How many times before that? How many doses has Ella already received? Sarah's expression answered before her words did. Too many. Potentially dozens. You need to take Ella to a pediatrician immediately. Tonight if possible. She needs blood work to check for benzodiazepines in her system, liver function tests, neurological assessment. These drugs can accumulate in a child's system, and we need to know if there's been ongoing exposure. Michael's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs, trying to anchor himself to something solid. Rex knew, he said quietly. Every single meal. He was trying to tell me and I thought he was being jealous. I thought, his voice cracked. God, I almost had him put down for trying to save her. Sarah moved around the desk and crouched beside his chair, her hand on his shoulder in the first non-professional gesture she'd made all evening. The dog probably detected the chemical odor. Benzodiazepines have a distinctive smell to trained canines. That's why he was focused on the food, not the nanny. He wasn't aggressive. He was alerting. What do I do now? The question came out desperate, stripped of the analytical control Michael usually maintained. Do I confront Bianca? Call the police? What if she runs? What if? You call Detective Wade back right now, Sarah said firmly. You give him my contact information and tell him I have forensic evidence of child endangerment with intent to harm. I'll prepare a formal report tonight. Chemical analysis, concentrations, medical implications, everything documented and defensible in court. But Michael, you need to understand something. She waited until he met her eyes. Someone who drugs a child repeatedly over months isn't just negligent. They're not making a mistake or having a mental health crisis. This is calculated, deliberate, which means Bianca Santos or whoever she really is had a plan. And you need to figure out what that plan was before she realizes you know. The implications crystallized with awful clarity. 3 months of carefully administered sedatives. 3 months of making Ella drowsy and compliant during the hours Michael was most distracted by work. 3 months of building, what? Trust? Access? An opportunity for something worse? Michael thought of the afternoons Ella had slept unusually long. The mornings she'd seemed dazed and uncoordinated. The way Bianca had always been so insistent on handling meals alone, so quick to deflect when Michael offered to help. Every red flag Rex had raised that Michael had systematically ignored because accepting the warning meant shattering the fragile normalcy he'd built after Rebecca's death. His daughter had been drugged repeatedly in his own home while he worked 15 feet away, and he'd been too desperate for help, too grateful for Bianca's competence, too willing to trust to see what was happening. I need to get Ella to a hospital, he said, standing abruptly. I need to. You need to call the police first, Sarah insisted. Get them involved officially. If you confront Bianca or tip her off before law enforcement is engaged, she could destroy evidence, flee, or do something desperate. Let Wade handle the tactical response. Your job is protecting Ella and documenting everything you know. Michael pulled out his phone with trembling hands and stared at Wade's missed call. One return call would set everything in motion. Investigation, arrest, Ella's name in police reports, the neighborhood knowing his daughter had been systematically poisoned by the woman he'd trusted with her care. But it would also clear Rex. Prove the dog had been a hero, not a threat. Save other children if Bianca had done this before or planned to do it again. He pressed dial. Wade answered on the second ring. Mr. Grayson, I was hoping you'd call back. I have some follow-up questions about today's incident. Detective, I need you to listen very carefully. Michael interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I have forensic evidence that my daughter's nanny has been drugging her with sedatives. Multiple doses over an extended period. I have samples, lab analysis, and video documentation. And I need you to arrest her before she realizes I know." Silence on the other end. "Then, where are you right now?" "At a private forensic lab in the city. Dr. Sarah Chen's facility. She has the analysis results. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. I'm sending a unit to your house immediately to secure the scene, and I'm coming to you. Give me the address." Michael rattled off Sarah's lab location while she nodded approval, already gathering her reports and evidence logs. 40 minutes, Wade said. Less if traffic cooperated. Michael ended the call and moved to the couch where Ella slept, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of innocence. How much poison was in her system right now? How close had Rex's intervention come to being too late? "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered, brushing hair from her forehead. "Daddy should have listened sooner." Behind him, Sarah began organizing documentation for the police. Chemical analysis reports, photographic evidence, chain of custody records, medical assessments of the danger the drugs pose to a child. The machinery of justice starting its slow grind toward accountability. And somewhere in Maplewood, Bianca Santos sat in her apartment or her car or wherever she'd gone after leaving the Grayson house, unaware that the careful plan she'd executed for 3 months had just been exposed by the one witness she couldn't charm or manipulate or deceive. A retired canine with a nose that never lied and instincts that refused to be ignored. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from the animal control facility. Reminder: 38 hours remaining for documentation submission regarding German Shepherd Rex. Case number 2847. He replied with steady fingers, "Evidence being compiled. Dog will be exonerated. Thank you for your patience." Then he sat beside his sleeping daughter and waited for the police to arrive, for justice to begin its work, for the truth that Rex had been trying to reveal since the moment Bianca Santos walked through their door. The long night was just beginning. Detective Wade arrived at Sarah's lab at 12:34 a.m. with 2 other officers and the methodical intensity of someone who understood that cases were built on documentation, not emotion. He listened to Michael's account without interrupting, took possession of Sarah's forensic reports with the careful reverence evidence deserved, and asked questions that cut through to the core of what could be proven versus what was suspected. By 1:15 a.m. they'd established a plan. Wade would obtain a warrant for Bianca's arrest based on the toxicology evidence and Michael's video documentation. A unit would be dispatched to her listed address. And Michael would return home to compile every piece of digital evidence the nanny cam system had captured. A complete timeline of Bianca's actions that could withstand scrutiny in court. "Don't confront her if she contacts you," Wade warned as Michael prepared to leave, Ella drowsy and confused in his arms. "Don't tip her off that we're investigating. Act normal. Act like you're still deciding whether to keep her employed. We need her to feel safe until we can locate and apprehend her." Michael had driven home through empty streets, his mind cycling between cold fury and nauseating guilt. Ella dozed against his shoulder, unaware that in a few hours she'd be at the pediatric urgent care getting blood drawn, getting tested for the poison that had been fed to her in spoonfuls disguised as love and care. Now, at 2:47 a.m., Michael sat in his home office with the door closed, multiple monitors glowing in the darkness, scrubbing through 3 weeks of nanny cam footage with the systematic focus he usually reserved for finding security vulnerabilities in corporate networks. This was different. This was personal. Every frame showed his daughter, his home, his catastrophic failure of judgment. The nanny cam system had 4 cameras: kitchen, living room, playroom, and hallway. Michael had installed them when Bianca started, a standard precaution recommended by the agency. He checked the footage occasionally in the first week, saw nothing concerning, and gradually stopped reviewing it as trust built and routine settled in. That trust had nearly killed his daughter. He started with the kitchen camera, pulling up the footage from today, yesterday technically, given the hour. 12:43 p.m. Bianca moving through the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Ella in her high chair, swinging her legs and babbling. Rex on the floor near the pantry, his body language tense even in the grainy footage. Michael watched Bianca prepare the bowl, watched her glance toward the hallway where Michael had been working, watched her pull the small container from her cardigan pocket. The angle wasn't perfect, but he could see her tap something into the bowl, white powder mixing with the rice and vegetables. She stirred carefully, checking the consistency, then lifted the spoon toward Ella's mouth. Rex's explosive intervention looked even more precise on camera. The dog's trajectory, the targeted strike at the bowl, the complete absence of aggression toward Bianca herself. Michael saved the clip, tagged it with timestamp and description, added it to the evidence folder. Then he went back. 1 day, 2 days, a week. The pattern emerged with damning consistency. Monday 3 days ago. 1:17 p.m. Michael visible in the background through the open office door, clearly on a video call. His posture, his gestures, his attention completely absorbed by work. Bianca in the kitchen, preparing lunch. She glanced toward the office twice, confirming his distraction, then pulled out the container. Crushed something between her fingers. Stirred it into Ella's mac and cheese. The little girl ate eagerly, trusting, hungry. Michael's hands clenched on the desk edge. He forced himself to continue. Thursday of the previous week. 12:52 p.m. Same pattern. Michael on a call with a client, visible through the office door. Bianca checking his location, then adulterating the food. Ella consuming it without hesitation, chattering about her stuffed animals while poison entered her system. Friday before that. Tuesday. Monday. The footage going back revealed 7 distinct incidents over 3 weeks where Bianca drugged his daughter's meals. Always when Michael was on calls. Always with the same careful preparation and concealment. Always followed by Ella becoming unusually drowsy within 30 minutes. But it was the aftermath footage that made Michael's stomach turn. He pulled up the living room camera, searching for the periods after those drugged meals. What he found stripped away any possibility that Bianca's actions were mistakes or misguided attempts to help a fussy eater. Monday 3 days ago. 1:47 p.m. 30 minutes after the drugged mac and cheese. Ella had migrated to the couch, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated, effects Michael had attributed to normal toddler tiredness. The footage showed her lying down, eyes drooping. Bianca sat beside her, stroking her hair with a gentleness that looked tender unless you knew what had caused the child's sedation. Then Bianca began singing. Michael turned up the audio and Spanish words filled his office, a lullaby, soft and melodic. He didn't speak Spanish fluently, but he caught fragments. Mi niña. Duerme mi amor. Mama está aquí. My girl. Sleep my love. Mama is here. Michael's blood went cold. Bianca had never mentioned speaking Spanish. Had never mentioned having children. Had presented herself as a professional nanny with excellent references, nothing more. He watched as Ella fell fully asleep on screen, her small chest rising and falling with the deep rhythm of sedation. Bianca continued stroking her hair, whispering words Michael couldn't make out. Then she did something that made him hit pause and stare at the frozen image. She lifted Ella's small hand and pressed it to her own cheek, holding it there with her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent conversation with someone who wasn't present. Michael forced himself to continue playing the footage. Bianca sat with unconscious Ella for another 20 minutes, rocking her gently, singing intermittently, lost in some private reality that had nothing to do with professional childcare. He moved to the next incident. Thursday of the previous week. Similar aftermath, drugged meal, sedated child, Bianca's disturbing vigil. But this time, when Ella was fully unconscious, Bianca did something even more unsettling. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, child-sized, with a heart pendant. She held it up to the light, examining it with an expression of such profound grief that Michael almost felt sympathy before remembering this woman had been poisoning his daughter. Bianca fastened the necklace around Ella's neck while the child slept. It hung there for perhaps 30 seconds before Bianca removed it, her hands shaking, tears visible on her cheeks even in the grainy footage. She returned the necklace to the box, returned the box to her bag, and resumed her rocking vigil. Michael zoomed in on the timestamp. Thursday 2:13 p.m. He'd been in his office working on security protocols for a banking client, completely unaware that 15 feet away, his daughter was wearing jewelry from a stranger's past while unconscious from deliberately administered sedatives. He continued scrubbing footage and the disturbing patterns multiplied. Bianca calling Ella, Ella Marie, instead of just Ella, a name that appeared nowhere in their household. Bianca photographing sleeping Ella with her personal phone from multiple angles. Bianca measuring Ella's height against a mark on the wall and noting something in a small notebook Michael had never seen her carry. One clip from 2 weeks ago showed Bianca sitting on the playroom floor beside unconscious Ella, holding one of the child's small shoes and speaking to it in Spanish, her voice thick with emotion. Te extraño tanto, mi amor. Pero te encontré. Mama te encontró. I miss you so much, my love. But I found you. Mama found you. Michael grabbed his phone and typed the phrase into a translation app, confirming what his fragmentary Spanish had suggested. Then he sat back in his chair, the full scope of Bianca's delusion crystallizing with horrifying clarity. She didn't see Ella as a child in her care. She saw Ella as a replacement, a substitute for someone, presumably named Ella Marie, that Bianca had lost. The drugging wasn't random abuse or negligence. It was calculated to create compliant, vulnerable time with a child Bianca believed, in some broken corner of her mind, belonged to her. Michael's phone buzzed. A text from Wade, Bianca Santos not at listed address. Landlord says she moved out last week. Working on locating her through employment records and vehicle registration. Do not engage if she contacts you. The apartment she'd moved out of. The one she'd claimed to still be living in when Michael had asked about her commute just 3 days ago. Another lie. Another layer of deception in a carefully constructed false identity. Michael returned to the footage, documenting every instance of drugging, every disturbing aftermath behavior, every moment of Bianca's private delusion captured by cameras she'd either not noticed or believed she'd positioned herself away from. He created a comprehensive timeline, dates, times, actions, audio transcripts of her Spanish murmurings. By 4:30 a.m., he had 17 separate video clips organized in chronological order, each one showing clear evidence of intentional drugging or subsequent disturbing behavior. He uploaded everything to a secure cloud drive, shared it with Wade, and created backup copies on 3 separate external drives. His phone rang. Wade's name on the screen. "I've been reviewing what you sent," the detective said without preamble. "This is worse than we thought. The Santos identity is almost certainly fake. No employment history before 8 months ago, no previous addresses, minimal digital footprint. We're treating this as a potential abduction in progress that your dog interrupted." Abduction? Michael's voice came out hollow. A woman drugs a child repeatedly to establish compliant behavior, moves out of her apartment without notice, maintains a false identity, and shows obsessive attachment to the child while using a different name. That's the pattern of someone planning to take the child and disappear. The toxicology gave us child endangerment charges. This footage suggests kidnapping conspiracy. Michael thought of Ella sleeping upstairs, of how close he'd come to leaving her alone with Bianca for an entire day while he traveled for work next week. A trip Bianca had encouraged him to take, insisting she could handle overnight care. "We've issued a bolo for her vehicle and put alerts on her credit cards," Wade continued. "But I need you to do something for me. Check your house thoroughly. Look for anything that doesn't belong, equipment, recording devices, anything that suggests she was gathering information or preparing for something." Michael was already moving, phone pressed to his ear, climbing the stairs to Ella's room. His daughter slept peacefully, Rex's absence a tangible ache in the space where the dog should have been lying across the threshold. He checked the closet, the drawers, under the bed. Nothing obvious. Nothing out of place. But then he noticed Ella's jewelry box, a small wooden container Rebecca had given her, mostly filled with plastic dress-up jewelry. Michael opened it, and there, nestled among the gaudy costume pieces, was the silver necklace from the footage. The one Bianca had tried on Ella while she was unconscious. Heart-shaped pendant. Delicate chain. An inscription on the back that Michael had to squint to read in the dim light from the hallway. "Ella Marie siempre en mi corazón." Always in my heart. "I found something," Michael said into the phone, his voice tight. A necklace hidden in Ella's jewelry box. Engraved with the name Ella Marie. Wade swore softly. "Bag it as evidence. Don't touch it with bare hands. That necklace likely belonged to whoever Bianca lost. Maybe a daughter, maybe someone else she had obsessive attachment to. She's been treating your Ella as a replacement." Michael found a Ziploc bag in the bathroom and carefully sealed the necklace inside using tissue paper to avoid contamination. His hands shook with the effort of staying calm, staying analytical, not giving in to the rage and terror that threatened to overwhelm his systematic documentation. "There's something else," Wade said, and his tone made Michael's stomach drop. "We ran the name Ella Marie through missing persons and death records. There was an Ella Marie Ruiz who died in foster care in Arizona 18 months ago. 3 years old. Cause of death was complications from chronic medical abuse. Munchausen by proxy. Mother's name was Bianca Ruiz." The pieces fell into place with sickening finality. Bianca hadn't just lost a daughter. She'd killed one through systematic abuse, lost custody, and then lost the child entirely when the damage proved fatal. And instead of accepting responsibility or grief, she'd created a new identity, found a new Ella, and begun the process again. "She was going to take my daughter," Michael said, the words barely audible. "Drug her into compliance and take her. That's what the evidence suggests. And if your dog hadn't intervened when he did, if you hadn't been suspicious enough to collect those samples, she might have succeeded. Wade paused. We're going to find her, Michael. I have units checking known associates, previous addresses, anywhere she might run. But until we have her in custody, you and Ella need protection. Michael looked at his sleeping daughter, at the evidence of conspiracy hidden in her jewelry box, at the empty space where Rex should have been standing guard. 48 hours ago, his biggest concern had been balancing work and single fatherhood. Now he was documenting attempted kidnapping by a woman who'd systematically drugged his child while planning to steal her and disappear. Rex knew, he said again, the same hollow observation he'd made in Sarah's lab. From the first day. He tried to tell me. The dog saved your daughter's life, Wade said simply. And probably saved other children too. We're checking if Bianca worked for other families before yours. That K9's intervention stopped this before it could escalate to completion. Michael ended the call and returned to his office, to the monitors still glowing with frozen images of Bianca's disturbing vigils over his sedated daughter. He had 34 hours left to submit documentation clearing Rex of dangerous behavior charges. He opened a new document and began typing his statement for animal control, his fingers steady now with purpose. Not a defensive explanation of why his dog shouldn't be punished, but an offensive declaration of why Rex deserved commendation for detecting and neutralizing a threat that every human in the house had failed to recognize. Evidence attached. Toxicology reports, video footage, timeline of drugging incidents, police investigation details, proof of Rex's perfect instincts and restraint. The statement took him 2 hours to write, documenting every instance of Rex's warnings that Michael had dismissed, every calculated action the dog had taken to protect Ella, every moment of perfect control even while intervening with explosive force. By 6:47 a.m., as dawn light began filtering through the office windows, Michael hit send on the submission. Then he climbed the stairs one more time to check on Ella, who was stirring awake, calling for him with the innocent trust of a child who didn't yet know how close she'd come to being lost forever. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, lifting her into his arms and holding her perhaps too tightly. "We're going to see a doctor today, just to make sure you're healthy and strong." "Is Rex coming home?" she asked, her small voice hopeful. Michael thought of the evidence now in police hands, of the commendation he'd requested, of the dog sitting in an animal control facility waiting to learn if trust had been enough. "Yes, baby. Rex is coming home. He's a hero and heroes always come home." He just hoped he was right. The pediatric urgent care clinic opened at 7 a.m. Michael was waiting in the parking lot with Ella when the first nurse unlocked the doors, his daughter drowsy and confused about why they were visiting a doctor when she didn't feel sick. The blood draw made her cry, and Michael held her steady while trying not to think about how many times Bianca had watched her struggle with coordination and balance and blamed it on typical toddler clumsiness rather than sedative effects. The doctor, a tired woman in her 50s who'd probably seen too many child abuse cases, listened to Michael's explanation with an expression that cycled from skepticism to horror as he showed her Sarah's toxicology report. She ordered a comprehensive panel: benzodiazepines, antihistamines, liver function, kidney function, neurological markers. Ella would have results within hours, she said, and depending on what they found, might need to be admitted for observation. Michael left the clinic at 8:47 a.m. with Ella clutching a stuffed bear the nurse had given her, his phone already buzzing with updates from Wade. Still no location on Bianca. Her vehicle hadn't pinged any traffic cameras or toll systems since yesterday afternoon. Her credit cards showed no activity. She'd either gone to ground or fled the state, and without knowing her real identity beyond what Wade had discovered about Bianca Ruiz, tracking her was proving difficult. But Michael had skills the police didn't. 20 years of cybersecurity work had taught him how to find people who didn't want to be found, how to follow digital breadcrumbs through layers of false identities and scrubbed records. He'd spent his career exposing vulnerabilities in systems designed to be secure. Finding one woman who'd created a fake identity couldn't be harder than penetrating corporate firewalls. At home, he settled Ella in front of her favorite cartoon with strict instructions not to leave the living room, positioned his laptop where he could see her through the doorway, and began the kind of deep background investigation that existed in legal gray areas but yielded results law enforcement couldn't obtain without warrants and probable cause. He started with what Wade had confirmed: Bianca Ruiz, Arizona resident, daughter Ella Marie Ruiz deceased 18 months ago, child endangerment charges that had been sealed as part of a plea agreement. Michael pulled up databases he'd used for corporate due diligence, aggregated public records, property ownership histories, employment verification systems, social media archives that preserved deleted content. The Bianca Ruiz who emerged from the digital fragments was a ghost story wrapped in tragedy and delusion. Born Bianca Elena Ruiz in Tucson, 34 years old. Married at 23 to Carlos Ruiz, divorced at 27 with primary custody of their daughter, Ella Marie. Employment history showed sporadic work as a home health aide and childcare provider, with gaps that suggested instability or undocumented income. Social media presence from 5 years ago showed a woman who posted constantly about her daughter, hundreds of photos, loving captions, the obsessive documentation of a parent whose entire identity had fused with motherhood. Then, 3 years ago the post stopped abruptly. Michael found the gap suspicious and dug deeper, searching archived news reports from Tucson area media. He found what he was looking for in a brief article from a local paper. Mother charged after child hospitalized repeatedly. The details made him nauseous. Ella Marie Ruiz had been admitted to Phoenix Children's Hospital 14 times over 18 months for various ailments. Vomiting, seizures, infections, unexplained symptoms that required extensive testing. Doctors eventually grew suspicious of the pattern and found evidence that Bianca had been inducing the illnesses, fabricating symptoms, possibly administering substances to make her daughter sick. Munchausen by proxy. A psychiatric condition where a caregiver deliberately causes harm to someone under their care to gain attention and sympathy. Bianca had been slowly killing her daughter to feed her own psychological need to be seen as a devoted, struggling mother. Child Protective Services removed Ella Marie from Bianca's custody. Criminal charges followed: child endangerment, assault, medical abuse. The case file was sealed, but Michael found references to it in court dockets and plea agreements archived in legal databases. Bianca had accepted a deal: psychological treatment, probation, permanent loss of parental rights in exchange for reduced charges and the sealing of records. 6 months into that probation, Ella Marie died in foster care. The death certificate cited complications from chronic medical trauma, organ damage, neurological impairment, infections that her small body could no longer fight after months of systematic abuse. Bianca had killed her daughter slowly over 18 months, and the system had been too slow to save her. Michael found Bianca's final social media post, dated 2 weeks after Ella Marie's death. Just 3 words: "I'll find you." Then the Bianca Ruiz digital footprint went dark. No social media activity. No employment records. No address changes or utility bills or credit card transactions. She'd either ceased to exist or had become someone else. Michael pulled up identity verification databases used for employment screening and began searching for creation of new identities around the time frame of Ella Marie's death. Bianca Santos appeared 8 months ago. Social security number that checked out but with minimal history, an address in Maplewood that corresponded to a short-term rental, employment with the nanny agency that Michael had used. The agency. Michael called them, keeping his voice professional despite the rage building in his chest. He explained that he was following up on a background check discrepancy and needed to verify what documentation Bianca Santos had provided when she registered with them. The agency representative, a harried-sounding woman named Patricia, pulled up the file. Ms. Santos submitted the standard packet: driver's license, social security card, 3 professional references, background check authorization, CPR certification, and a cleared criminal history report from a private screening company. Which screening company? Michael asked, already pulling up his laptop to search. Secure Screen Solutions. They're one of our approved vendors. Michael found the company within seconds. A legitimate business, but one that relied on self-reported information and database searches that wouldn't catch sealed or expunged records, especially if the person had created a new identity specifically to evade them. Bianca had gamed the system, presenting just enough documentation to appear legitimate while hiding the truth of who she really was. Did she provide any personal history? Previous employment, reason for career change, anything like that? Patricia hesitated. I'm not sure I should be sharing confidential employee information. The police are investigating her for child endangerment and attempted kidnapping, Michael said flatly. Detective Marcus Wade, Maplewood PD. You can call him to verify. But right now I need to know everything she told you about herself. A long pause. Then, she said she'd been working privately for families in Arizona but wanted a fresh start after a difficult personal situation. She was very professional in her interview, very knowledgeable about child development. Her references checked out. We called all 3. Give me their names and numbers. Patricia read them off and Michael recognized the pattern immediately. All three were disconnected phone numbers or VoIP services that could be routed to burner phones. Bianca had created an entire false history, complete with references that were probably her own voice adopting different tones, answering predetermined questions with rehearsed responses. She'd planned this. Months of preparation, creating an identity that would pass cursory screening, positioning herself to access families with young daughters named Ella. Michael ended the call and contacted Wade with what he'd found. The detective listened in silence, then swore with feeling. "We need to find where she actually lived. The Maplewood address is a dead end. Landlord says she paid cash for 3 months, never gave emergency contacts, cleared out last week without notice. But if she's Bianca Ruiz from Arizona, she might have maintained some connection to the area or to people she knew before." Michael was already searching property records, rental listings, utility hookups in the greater Phoenix area under variations of Bianca's name. Nothing under Bianca Ruiz or Bianca Santos. But when he expanded the search to include maiden names and common aliases, there. A storage unit rented 18 months ago in Tempe, Arizona, under the name Elena Santos. Payments set up on autopay from a bank account that was still active. The facility required a physical address for the rental agreement, 2847 Desert Rose Lane, apartment 14B. Michael pulled up the address and found a low-income apartment complex on the outskirts of Phoenix. Current resident listings showed no Bianca Ruiz or Elena Santos, but the manager's contact information was available. Michael called, identified himself as working with police on a criminal investigation, and asked about any tenants matching Bianca's description who might have lived there within the past 2 years. The manager, an older man with a suspicious tone, said he couldn't give out tenant information. But when Michael mentioned the storage unit and the possibility of evidence related to child endangerment, his voice softened. "There was a woman who lived in 14B about a year and a half ago," he said slowly. "Kept to herself, paid rent in cash, left suddenly without much notice. Said she was moving to Montana for work. I remember because she left boxes of stuff in the apartment that I had to clear out and put in storage. If that's her, she still owes me for disposal fees." Montana. The word stuck in Michael's mind. Did she say where in Montana? Somewhere rural, I think. She mentioned it was quiet, good for healing or starting over or something. I didn't pay much attention. Tenants tell you all kinds of stories. Michael thanked him and immediately called Wade with the update. Montana. She told her previous landlord she was moving to Montana. That might be where she was planning to take Ella. Wade's voice sharpened. That tracks with the pattern. Remote location, far from Arizona where she has a criminal record, far from Massachusetts where people know her as Bianca Santos. We need to check property rentals in Montana under both names. I'm on it, Michael said, already pulling up rental listing archives and property databases. Montana was a big state, mostly rural, thousands of potential locations where someone could disappear with a stolen child. But if Bianca had actually rented a property in preparation, he searched for months, methodically checking rental agreements filed in Montana counties under Bianca Ruiz, Bianca Santos, Elena Santos, and variations thereof. Most databases required law enforcement credentials to access detailed records, but Michael had worked with enough corporate clients to know the backdoors and publicly available indexes. And there, filed 6 weeks ago in Flathead County, he found it. A 1-year lease agreement for a single-family home on 15 acres outside Whitefish, Montana. Renter, Elena Santos. Payment made via wire transfer from an account Michael traced back to a bank in Phoenix. He sent the address to Wade immediately, 4721 Blacktail Road, Whitefish, Montana 59937. Getting a warrant now, Wade texted back within minutes. Coordinating with Montana State Police. Do not attempt to access this location yourself. Repeat, do not go anywhere near Montana. Let law enforcement handle this. But Michael was already pulling up satellite imagery of the property. A isolated cabin surrounded by forest, nearest neighbor half a mile away, the kind of place where you could keep a drugged child hidden for weeks or months while establishing whatever delusion you'd constructed about reclaiming your deceased daughter. His phone rang. Wade's voice was tight with controlled urgency. We have a problem. Bianca's vehicle pinged a toll camera on I-90 West in South Dakota at 6:15 this morning. She's heading toward Montana. She's running for the cabin. Michael's blood went cold. How long until she gets there? Montana State Police estimate she'll reach Whitefish in approximately 8 to 10 hours if she maintains current speed. We've got units moving to intercept, but it's a lot of ground to cover in a rural area. I'm also getting a warrant to search her Maplewood apartment. The real one, wherever she was actually living. If we can find more evidence of planning, it strengthens the case for federal kidnapping conspiracy charges. Michael thought of the digital traces he'd been following, the picture of obsession and delusion emerging from bank records and rental agreements and social media silence. Bianca had been preparing this for months, possibly longer. She'd found a child who matched her deceased daughter's name and approximate age, created a false identity to access her, systematically drugged her to establish compliant behavior, and arranged a remote location where she could disappear with her stolen replacement. If Rex hadn't intervened yesterday, if Michael hadn't grown suspicious enough to collect evidence, Bianca would have completed her plan. She would have taken Ella during some manufactured crisis. Maybe a park visit where the child wandered off. Maybe a staged accident that required emergency care Bianca would provide. Maybe simply drugging her heavily enough to carry her out during one of Michael's long work meetings. And Ella would have woken up in a cabin in Montana, possibly still sedated, with a woman calling herself Mama and insisting she was home where she belonged. "I need you to stay put," Wade was saying. "Protect Ella, document everything, and let us handle the tactical response. We will find Bianca Ruiz and we will arrest her. But I need you focused on being a father right now, not an investigator." Michael looked through the doorway at Ella, still watching cartoons on the couch, her small body curled around the stuffed bear from the clinic. Innocent and trusting and completely unaware of the conspiracy that had nearly claimed her life and freedom. "I'm not going anywhere," Michael said. "But I need you to find her, Wade. I need you to make sure she can never do this to another family." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Wade promised. "I'll call you with updates. In the meantime, I'm sending a patrol unit to sit outside your house until we have Bianca in custody. Just as a precaution." The call ended, and Michael sat in the sudden silence of his office, surrounded by evidence of a predator who'd worn the mask of a caring nanny for 3 months while planning to steal his daughter. The same daughter who'd already lost her mother to cancer and had nearly lost her father to his own desperate need to believe the world was safer than it actually was. His phone buzzed with a new message. Not Wade this time, but the animal control facility. Documentation received and reviewed. Commendation approved for K9 Rex. Early release authorized. Please contact facility to arrange pickup. Rex was coming home. The hero who'd seen the truth when everyone else was blind. The guardian who'd refused to ignore his instincts even when it meant being branded dangerous by people who didn't understand what he'd been trying to protect. Michael looked at the clock. 11:34 a.m. Ella needed lunch. Actual lunch, food Michael would prepare himself with ingredients he'd personally verify. Then they'd drive to the animal control facility and bring Rex home to the family that should have trusted him from the beginning. And somewhere between South Dakota and Montana, on a highway cutting through empty landscape, Bianca Ruiz was driving toward a rented cabin that would become her prison instead of her sanctuary. Because this time the ending would be different. This time the child would be saved. This time, justice would arrive before tragedy could complete its cycle. Michael closed his laptop and went to make lunch for his daughter, his hands steady with purpose, his mind clear with the certainty that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources. Like a retired K9 who refused to stop watching, stop warning, stop protecting the innocent even when no one else believed the danger was real. Rex had been right all along. And very soon he'd be home. The call came at 2:47 p.m. while Michael was driving to the animal control facility, Ella strapped in her car seat behind him, singing a nonsense song about puppies and rainbows. Wade's voice carried the satisfaction of a detective who'd just closed a significant piece of his case. "We have her." Montana State Police intercepted Bianca's vehicle outside Kalispell, about 40 minutes from the Whitefish cabin. She's in custody, being extradited back to Massachusetts to face charges. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel, relief flooding through him so powerfully that he had to pull into a parking lot to steady himself. "She's arrested? It's over?" "She's arrested," Wade confirmed. "Charged with child endangerment, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, administering harmful substances to a minor, assault with a dangerous weapon, the sedatives qualify, and identity fraud." The Montana property search turned up additional evidence. A bedroom set up for a small child, clothing in Ella's size with the tags still on, medical supplies including more sedatives, and a journal detailing her entire plan. Michael closed his eyes, seeing in his mind the cabin bedroom Bianca had prepared, the clothes she'd bought for the daughter she planned to steal, the drugs she'd stockpiled to keep Ella compliant and confused while she played out her delusion of maternal reunion. What did the journal say? Wade's voice went flat, the professional distance slipping slightly. "It's disturbing, Michael. She refers to your Ella as Ella Marie returned to me, talks about correcting the mistake of losing her daughter, describes in detail how she planned to stage the disappearance. A trip to the park where Ella would wander off during a moment of distraction, giving Bianca time to drug her and drive to Montana before an Amber Alert could be issued. She'd been tracking your schedule, noting when you had important work meetings, planning the optimal window. The casual horror of it, the methodical planning, the calculated exploitation of Michael's trust and his demanding work schedule, made his stomach turn. Can I see it? The journal? It's evidence, so not yet. But once the case goes to trial, it'll be part of the discovery. For now, what matters is she's in custody and the charges are serious enough that she won't make bail easily. You and Ella are safe. Safe. The word seemed almost foreign after 3 months of unknowing danger. Michael pulled back into traffic and continued toward the animal control facility, where Rex waited behind chain-link fencing, unaware that his vindication was complete and total. What about Rex? Michael asked, though he already knew the answer from the morning's message. Full commendation. The video evidence and toxicology report proved definitively that his intervention was warranted and precisely controlled. He's being released with a formal statement from animal control praising his training and instincts. Honestly, Michael, that dog should get a medal. He detected a threat that every human in the situation missed and stopped it with surgical precision. Michael felt his throat tighten. I'm picking him up now. Good. Ella needs him. And frankly, so do you. Wade paused. I'll need you to come in tomorrow to give a formal statement for the prosecution. But tonight, go home. Be with your daughter and your dog. Let yourself believe the nightmare is over. The call ended just as Michael pulled into the animal control parking lot. Ella perked up immediately, recognizing the building from the terrible day they'd said goodbye to Rex. Is Rex here? She asked, her voice hopeful and tentative. Is he coming home? Yes, sweetheart. Rex is coming home. Inside, Officer Valdez processed the release paperwork with the apologetic efficiency of someone who recognized she'd nearly separated a hero from his family. I'm sorry about the initial assessment, she said as she handed Michael the commendation letter. The situation looked clear-cut from the surface, but obviously there was much more going on. Rex is a remarkable animal. He is, Michael agreed simply. When they brought Rex out from the kennel area, the German Shepherd's entire body went rigid with recognition and relief. He pulled toward Michael and Ella with barely contained urgency, his tail wagging so hard his whole back end swayed. Ella shrieked with joy and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur while Rex whined and licked her cheek with the desperate affection of a guardian reunited with his charge. Michael crouched down and wrapped his arms around both of them, daughter and dog, the family that had survived because one member had refused to ignore what his instincts screamed was wrong. Thank you, he whispered into Rex's ear. Thank you for not giving up on us. Rex's amber eyes met his with that same steady intelligence, that same unshakable certainty. The dog had known, had always known, and now everyone else finally knew too. They drove home in the late afternoon sunlight, Ella chattering to Rex from her car seat, the dog positioned in the back with his head resting near her hand, maintaining physical contact as if to confirm she was real and safe. Michael felt lighter than he had in months, the constant low-grade anxiety that had plagued him since Rebecca's death finally easing into something resembling peace. At home, he made dinner, simple pasta with vegetables he personally prepared and watched cook from start to finish, while Ella and Rex played in the living room. The house felt whole again, the missing piece restored, the fracture healing. That evening, the pediatrician called with Ella's blood work results. She does have elevated benzodiazepine levels, Dr. Martinez said, her voice measured and professional. Consistent with repeated exposure over several weeks. But the good news is there's no indication of organ damage or neurological impairment. With no further exposure, the drugs will clear her system naturally within a few days. Kids are resilient, Mr. Grayson. She's going to be fine. Fine. Ella was going to be fine. Michael felt tears prick his eyes as he thanked the doctor and ended the call. His daughter would recover fully from the poison that had been fed to her disguised as love and care. The only lasting scars would be his own guilt for not seeing sooner, for not trusting Rex when trust could have prevented weeks of drugging. But Rex didn't hold grudges. He lay on the floor near Ella's feet while she colored at the coffee table, his body relaxed but his eyes alert, his presence a constant reminder that some forms of love were vigilant rather than blind. The next day, Michael gave his formal statement to Detective Wade, providing everything: video footage, toxicology reports, his own investigation into Bianca's true identity, the timeline of drugging incidents. Wade recorded it all with meticulous attention, building the prosecution's case brick by brick. Her arraignment is tomorrow, Wade said when they finished. With the evidence we have, the prosecutor is confident about conviction. She's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum, possibly more if the federal kidnapping conspiracy charges stick. Michael nodded, feeling no satisfaction in Bianca's impending imprisonment, only relief that she wouldn't be able to harm another child. What about other families? Did she work for anyone else? We're investigating. The nanny agency is cooperating, providing records of her previous placements. There were 2 other families over the past 6 months before she came to you. Both had daughters, though neither named Ella. We're interviewing them to determine if there was similar behavior. The thought of other children potentially drugged, other families violated by Bianca's obsession, made Michael's chest tighten. But at least now she was stopped. Caught. Unable to continue her predatory pattern. For 2 days life almost felt normal. Michael worked from home with Rex lying under his desk, close enough to touch. Ella played with renewed energy as the drugs cleared from her system, her coordination improving, her afternoon drowsiness disappearing. Neighbors who'd been quick to condemn Rex now offered awkward apologies and praise for the dog's heroic intervention. Mrs. Patterson even brought over a casserole and an apology card, though Michael could barely bring himself to accept either. They were settling back into routine. Breakfast together, work time while Ella played under Rex's watchful supervision, afternoon walks where Rex stayed glued to Ella's side. Michael began to believe that the trauma was behind them, that the healing could truly begin. Then, on the 3rd day after Bianca's arrest, Detective Wade called with news that shattered the fragile sense of security. Bianca made bail. Michael's blood went cold. He was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and his hand froze with the knife halfway through a tomato. What do you mean she made bail? You said the charges were serious. They are. But she hired a good defense attorney who argued she wasn't a flight risk since she'd been intercepted before reaching the Montana cabin, that she had no prior convictions in Massachusetts, and that the sealed Arizona records couldn't be used to establish a pattern. The judge set bail at $250,000. She made it through a bondsman 2 hours ago. Where is she now? Released with a GPS ankle monitor and a restraining order keeping her at least 500 yards from you and Ella at all times. She's required to surrender her passport, check in daily with her bail supervisor, and remain within state boundaries. But Michael, I need to be honest with you. Obsessed individuals often violate restraining orders. The ankle monitor helps us track her location, but it can't physically prevent her from attempting contact. Michael looked through the doorway at Ella, who was building a tower of blocks with Rex lying watchfully beside her. The fragile piece shattered like glass. She's going to come for Ella. We don't know that. The restraining order is legally binding, and violating it means immediate revocation of bail. She'd be taking a huge risk. She was planning to kidnap my daughter and flee to Montana, Michael said, his voice tight. You think a restraining order is going to stop her? Wade was silent for a moment. I think you should consider staying somewhere else temporarily. With family or friends somewhere Bianca doesn't know about. Just until the trial date, until she's back in custody for good. Michael looked around the kitchen where Bianca had drugged his daughter repeatedly, the living room where she'd rocked Ella while singing lullabies to a ghost, the home that had been violated by her obsession and delusion. Let her drive them from the space they'd built, the life they were trying to reclaim? No, he said flatly. I'm not running. This is our home. Ella's already lost her mother and been poisoned by someone she trusted. I'm not adding more trauma by uprooting her because the legal system let a predator walk free on bail. Michael. I'll upgrade the security system. I'll keep Rex close. But we're not leaving our home because of her. Wade sighed, the sound carrying resignation and understanding. Then at least let me have a patrol car do regular drive-bys. And install a panic button that goes directly to dispatch. If Bianca violates the restraining order, we need to know immediately. Fine. Whatever you think is necessary. And Michael? Trust your dog. If Rex alerts to anything, don't rationalize it. Don't second-guess it. Call 911 immediately. The words hung in the air after Wade ended the call. Trust your dog. The lesson Michael had learned too late and too painfully. He spent the afternoon upgrading security, new locks on all doors and windows, motion sensor lights for the yard, cameras covering every angle of approach to the house. He installed the panic button Wade sent over, positioning it within reach of both the kitchen and the living room. He pulled Rex's old tactical vest from storage and showed it to the dog, whose ears perked with recognition. If Bianca came, Rex would be ready. That night, Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ella slept peacefully down the hall and Rex maintained his post outside her door. Bianca was somewhere in Massachusetts, ankle monitor tracking her location, restraining order legally prohibiting her from coming within 500 yards of his family. But laws and GPS trackers couldn't constrain delusion. They couldn't stop someone who'd already committed to a plan, who'd already demonstrated willingness to drug a child repeatedly, who'd already prepared a cabin in Montana for the daughter she believed had been stolen from her. Michael pulled up the ankle monitor tracking app Wade had given him access to. Bianca's location showed as an address in Worcester, 43 miles away. Far enough to comply with the restraining order. Close enough to drive to Maplewood in under an hour if she decided compliance no longer mattered. He watched the blinking dot that represented Bianca's location, watched it remain stationary throughout the evening, and told himself the restraining order would hold. The ankle monitor would alert if she moved toward them. The patrol car that drove past every 2 hours would deter any violation attempt. But some part of him, the part that had learned to trust instinct over appearance, knew that the nightmare wasn't over. It was just waiting for the next act to begin. Michael hadn't truly slept in 3 days. He'd laid in bed, staring at shadows on the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak, checking the ankle monitor app every 15 minutes to confirm that Bianca's location remained stationary at her Worcester address. 43 miles away. Safely contained by law and GPS technology and the threat of immediate incarceration if she violated the terms of her bail. But on the third night at 2:47 a.m., Michael learned that desperation made its own rules. The sound that pulled him from his half-conscious vigil wasn't loud. It was barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of late-night traffic. But it cut through his awareness like a blade because he recognized it from Rex's working days, from the videos he'd watched of K9 training exercises, from the primal warning system bred into guardian breeds over thousands of years. A low, steady growl. Not the casual grumble of a dog disturbed in his sleep. Not the warning bark of a pet who'd heard something unusual outside. This was the controlled, focused vocalization of a K9 who had detected a confirmed threat and was alerting his handler with tactical precision. Michael's eyes snapped open. His heart rate spiked from resting to combat ready in a single beat. He rolled out of bed silently, muscle memory from his own service days overriding the civilian instinct to call out and ask what was wrong. In situations like this, silence was survival. Rex stood in the hallway outside Ella's door, his body low and coiled, every muscle tensed for action. His ears were pinned forward, his gaze locked on the staircase leading down to the first floor. The growl continued, barely audible but absolutely certain. Threat detected. Threat approaching. Handler needed now. Michael moved to Rex's side, placed one hand on the dog's shoulders, feeling the vibration of that controlled warning rumble through fur and muscle, and looked down the stairs into the darkness of the first floor. At first he saw nothing. Just shadows and the faint illumination from the night light in the kitchen. Then movement. So subtle he almost missed it. A figure near the back door, barely visible in the ambient light from the street. Someone moving with the slow, careful precision of a person who knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. Michael's blood turned to ice water. He moved silently to the security monitor mounted in the upstairs hallway, the one connected to the upgraded camera system he'd installed 3 days ago. The screen glowed to life at his touch, cycling through camera feeds. Back door. Kitchen. Living room. Front yard. The back door camera showed her clearly despite the darkness. Bianca Ruiz, dressed in black pants and a dark hoodie, her face pale in the infrared illumination. She was crouched at the door, something metallic gleaming in her hand. Not lockpicks. A key. She was using a key Michael didn't know existed, turning it slowly in the deadbolt with the patient focus of someone who had all the time in the world because she believed no one knew she was there. The lock clicked open. Michael heard it from upstairs, the soft snick of metal disengaging that meant his home security had just been breached by someone who'd planned this intrusion weeks or months ago, copying keys during her time as their trusted nanny, preparing for the moment when legal constraints wouldn't matter anymore because her obsession demanded action. Michael's training took over. Assess. Plan. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the emergency call screen, pressed 911, and brought it to his lips while keeping his eyes on the security monitor. "This is Michael Grayson at 847 Maple Street, Maplewood," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "Bianca Ruiz has broken into my home. She has a restraining order. She's currently in my kitchen. My daughter is upstairs. I need units here immediately. Silent approach. She doesn't know I'm aware yet." The dispatcher's voice came back calm and professional. "Units are already en route, Mr. Grayson." Detective Wade was monitoring Ms. Ruiz's ankle monitor and saw her leave the restriction zone 14 minutes ago heading in your direction. "He's 3 minutes out with backup. Can you get yourself and your daughter to a secure location?" Michael looked at Ella's closed door, at Rex standing guard, at the staircase that was the only route to the second floor. "Negative. Only exit is past the intruder. We're barricading upstairs. Stay on the line. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." But Michael had already moved past civilian rules of engagement. This was his home, his daughter, and a woman who'd proven she would drug, manipulate, and kidnap to feed her delusion. He wasn't waiting for her to reach Ella's room. He positioned himself at the top of the stairs, Rex at his side, the dog's growl now silent but his body language screaming readiness. Michael could see down into the kitchen through the open floor plan of the first level. Bianca had made it fully inside and was closing the back door behind her with aching slowness, trying to maintain silence. She carried a backpack, dark canvas, bulging with contents Michael didn't want to imagine but could guess. Sedatives, restraints, maybe forged documents for the Canadian border. Everything she'd need to take Ella and disappear into the delusion she'd constructed. She moved through the kitchen toward the stairs, and in the faint light Michael saw her face. It wasn't the calculating expression of a predator hunting prey. It was something worse, the desperate, tear-streaked face of someone who genuinely believed she was doing something righteous. Her lips moved, whispering words Michael couldn't hear but could imagine. "I'm coming, baby girl. Mama's here. Mama's going to fix everything." She reached the base of the stairs and placed one foot on the first step. Michael flipped the hallway light switch. Illumination flooded the staircase, and Bianca froze like a deer caught in headlights, her eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness, her gaze traveling up the stairs to where Michael stood with Rex at his side. For a single heartbeat, they stared at each other across the vertical distance. The father protecting his daughter, the obsessed woman who believed that daughter belonged to her. Then Bianca's face transformed. The calculation drained away, replaced by desperate pleading that Michael recognized as even more dangerous than aggression. This was the face of someone with nothing left to lose. "Michael, please," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion that sounded genuine because in her broken mind it was genuine. "Please, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need to talk to Ella. I need to explain. She doesn't remember me but she will. Deep down she knows I'm her mother." "You're not her mother," Michael said, keeping his voice level despite the rage and fear coursing through him. "Your daughter died, Bianca. Ella Marie died because of what you did to her. My Ella is not your replacement." Tears streamed down Bianca's face. "She came back to me. I knew she would. The universe doesn't make mistakes like that, taking a child from her mother. She was reborn, Michael. She came back and I found her. I found her and I've been trying to take care of her, but you and that dog." Her gaze flicked to Rex with pure hatred. "That animal ruined everything. He wouldn't let me help her. Wouldn't let me prepare her for coming home. You were poisoning her. I was helping her transition." Bianca's voice rose, the desperate control fracturing. The medicine made her calm, made her receptive. She needed to be ready, Michael. Ready to remember who she really is. Ready to come home with me where she belongs. Behind Ella's closed door, Michael heard stirring. His daughter was waking up, disturbed by the raised voices. In less than a minute, she'd open the door and see this confrontation. See the woman who drugged her standing in their home in the middle of the night, carrying supplies for abduction. "The police are coming," Michael said quietly. "Detective Wade is already on his way. You're violating your restraining order, Bianca. If you leave now before Ella wakes up, maybe?" "I'm not leaving without her." The desperation cracked completely, revealing the obsession beneath. "I've waited too long. Planned too carefully. I have everything ready. The cabin is perfect. I have her room set up. I have new identities for both of us. We can start over. She'll be Ella Marie again, and I'll be the mother I should have been before they took her away." She reached into her backpack and Michael's hand moved to the panic button mounted on the wall beside him. "Don't," he warned. But Bianca was beyond warnings. Her hand emerged from the backpack holding not a weapon but a small cloth, white, already damp with something that made Michael's nose burn even from 15 feet away. Chloroform or some other sedative, soaked into fabric, ready to be pressed over Ella's face to render her unconscious for transport. "I don't want to use this on you," Bianca said, her voice taking on an eerie calm. "But I will if I have to. Step aside, Michael. Let me take my daughter home." She took another step up the stairs. Rex's growl finally erupted into sound. a bark so loud and commanding it seemed to shake the walls. Not the frantic barking of an upset pet, but the authoritative warning of a K9 ordering a suspect to halt, the sound that had once stopped armed criminals in their tracks. Michael had heard Rex bark before, but never like this. Never with this much focused intensity and protective fury. Bianca stumbled backward, startled, nearly dropping the cloth. Her other hand darted into her jacket pocket and emerged with a small canister. Pepper spray. The same weapon she tried to use in the Montana cabin before her arrest. "Call off the dog," she demanded, her voice shaking but determined. "Call him off or I'll—" She didn't finish the threat because Rex was already moving. The German Shepherd launched himself down the stairs with the explosive speed of his tactical training, but instead of targeting Bianca directly, he positioned himself between her and Michael with perfect precision. His body became an impenetrable barrier, 65 pounds of muscle and training and absolute refusal to let the threat pass. He didn't bite. Didn't attack. Simply blocked the path with his presence and his continuing bark that filled the house with sound that was part warning, part protection, part rage at this woman who tried to harm his family. Bianca raised the pepper spray, finger on the trigger. The front door exploded inward. Bianca Ruiz dropped the weapon. Hands where we can see them. Down on the ground now. Detective Wade came through first, weapon drawn, followed by 4 officers who fanned out with tactical precision. They'd used a battering ram on the front door, abandoning silent approach the moment they'd heard Rex's warning bark from outside. 2 officers went for Bianca, who stood frozen on the stairs with pepper spray still raised, tears streaming down her face, her mouth open in shock that her carefully planned midnight retrieval had gone so catastrophically wrong. "She came back to me," Bianca whispered as the officers pulled her hands behind her back and cuffed her. "She came back and you're taking her away again. You don't understand. She's mine. She's always been mine." They pulled her toward the door, reading her rights, but she kept talking, kept insisting, kept trying to explain the delusion that had driven her to drug a child for 3 months and break into a home at 2:47 a.m. with supplies for kidnapping. The backpack fell during the arrest, its contents spilling across the floor, the chloroform cloth, zip tie restraints, a manila envelope with Canadian border crossing documents showing fake names and ages for a woman and her daughter, a bottle of liquid lorazepam, and a worn photograph of a small girl with curly hair who looked heartbreakingly similar to Ella. Ella Marie Ruiz. Dead 18 months. Still alive in her mother's fractured mind. Michael sank to the top step, his legs suddenly unreliable. Rex bounded back up the stairs and pressed against him, whining softly now that the threat was neutralized, seeking reassurance that his family was truly safe. Michael wrapped his arms around the dog and buried his face in familiar fur that smelled like kibble and loyalty and salvation. Behind Ella's door, his daughter called out, "Daddy? What's all the noise?" Michael stood, his hand resting on Rex's head, and opened the door. Ella stood in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed turtle, her eyes wide with confusion but not fear because she'd been protected from seeing the confrontation, protected from understanding how close she'd come to being taken. "It's okay, sweetheart," Michael said, lifting her into his arms. "There was a problem, but Rex fixed it. Rex protected us." Ella wrapped her arms around his neck, then reached down to pat Rex's head. "Good boy, Rex. Good boy." The German Shepherd's tail wagged once, slowly, his amber eyes meeting Michael's with perfect understanding. "I told you. I tried to tell you from the beginning. And now you finally believe." Downstairs, Wade was directing the crime scene processing, photographing the backpack contents, documenting the break-in, building the case that would ensure Bianca Ruiz never made bail again. He looked up as Michael descended the stairs with Ella in his arms and Rex at his side. "She'll be held without bail this time," Wade said quietly. "Violation of restraining order, attempted kidnapping, breaking and entering, possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute to a minor. She's done, Michael. She won't get another chance." Michael nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Done. Finally done. But as they stood in the ruins of the peaceful home he'd tried to build, front door shattered, police processing evidence in his kitchen, Ella confused and frightened in his arms, Michael understood that done was just the beginning of a different kind of work. The work of healing. The work of rebuilding trust. The work of teaching his daughter that most people were good, even though one person had been catastrophically dangerous. And the work of never, ever ignoring his instincts again. Or the instincts of those who loved his daughter enough to refuse to stop warning him until the threat was finally neutralized. Rex pressed against his leg, solid and steady and absolutely certain that his job was complete. The guardian had done his work. The family was safe. And this time, everyone finally believed it. Dawn broke over Maplewood with the kind of gentle light that made violence seem impossible, as if the previous night's confrontation had been a fever dream rather than documented reality. Michael sat in his living room surrounded by evidence of both trauma and triumph. The shattered front door now boarded with plywood, police evidence markers still scattered across the kitchen floor, and Rex's head resting heavily on his lap, the dog steady breathing, the only sound in the house besides the distant morning birds. Ella slept upstairs, exhausted from the disruption but mercifully unaware of how close she'd come to being taken. Michael had managed to shield her from seeing Bianca in handcuffs, from understanding that the woman who'd fed her lunch and sang her songs had broken into their home at 2:47 a.m. with supplies for abduction. To Ella, it had been a confusing night of loud noises and police officers, but Daddy and Rex had kept her safe, and that was enough for a 3-year-old's understanding. Michael's phone buzzed with the 17th message since 3 a.m. News traveled fast in suburban neighborhoods, especially news involving midnight arrests and restraining order violations. Neighbors expressing concern. His sister demanding he call immediately. Mrs. Patterson offering to bring over breakfast and apologizing again for doubting Rex. Michael ignored them all, too tired for explanations, too raw for social performance. The only message he'd answered was from Detective Wade at 6:34 a.m. Coming by at 8. Need to brief you on next steps. Now, at 7:52 a.m., Michael sat with his hand resting on Rex's shoulders, feeling the rise and fall of the dog's breathing, remembering every warning he'd dismissed, every alert he'd rationalized away, every moment Rex had tried to communicate danger while Michael chose comfortable lies over difficult truths. "I'm sorry," he whispered, not for the first time. "I should have trusted you from the beginning." Rex's amber eyes opened and met his, not with judgment or resentment, but with the steady patience of a guardian who understood that humans sometimes needed time to see what dogs detected instantly. The forgiveness in that gaze made Michael's throat tighten. A knock at the front door, careful, gentle, not wanting to wake Ella. Michael extricated himself from Rex's weight and opened the door to find Wade holding 2 coffees and a folder thick with documentation. "Figured you could use this," Wade said, handing over one of the cups. "It's going to be a long day." They sat at the kitchen table, the morning light making the evidence markers look even more surreal against the domestic backdrop of children's drawings on the refrigerator and Ella's plastic dishes in the drying rack. Wade opened the folder and began laying out what came next. Bianca Ruiz is being held without bail at the county jail. The judge revoked her previous bail after last night's violation, and given the new charges, breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, violation of restraining order, possession of controlled substances, she won't see daylight until trial. Her attorney contacted the prosecutor this morning indicating she wants to negotiate a plea deal. "What kind of deal?" Michael's voice came out rough with exhaustion and something darker. "The prosecutor is offering 15 to 20 years in exchange for a guilty plea and full cooperation in identifying any other families she may have targeted. Given the evidence, your video footage, the toxicology reports, the journal from the Montana cabin, last night's arrest with a backpack full of abduction supplies, she'd be foolish to refuse. A trial would likely result in a longer sentence. 15 to 20 years. It should have felt like justice, but Michael found himself feeling nothing except a hollow awareness that no prison sentence could undo the 3 months of drugging, the violation of trust, the knowledge that he'd welcomed danger into his home and called it help. Wade must have read something in his expression because his voice softened. "You couldn't have known, Michael. She fooled a professional screening agency, created a completely false identity, and had months of practice perfecting her deception with previous families. This wasn't a failure of your judgment. It was a predator being very, very good at hiding what she was." "Previous families?" The words penetrated Michael's exhaustion. "There were others?" Wade nodded grimly. "We've identified 3 families Bianca worked for over the past 8 months using the Santos identity. 2 had young daughters. We're in the process of interviewing them and recommending the children be tested for benzodiazepine exposure. Early indications suggest at least 2 show signs of having been drugged, unexplained drowsiness, elevated liver enzymes, behavioral changes the parents attributed to normal development. The scope of it, multiple children, multiple families, months of systematic abuse before Bianca ever reached the Graysons, made Michael feel sick. Why weren't they suspicious? Why didn't their dogs? He stopped, remembering that not everyone had a retired canine with combat-honed instincts. Most families just had pets, not protectors trained to detect chemical threats and intervene with tactical precision. "You got lucky," Wade said simply. "Lucky that you adopted Rex." Lucky that he had the training to recognize what was happening. Lucky that you were skeptical enough to collect evidence instead of just accepting animal control's initial assessment. A lot of things had to go right for this to end the way it did. Lucky. Michael looked at Rex, who'd moved to his position near the pantry, watching the conversation with alert eyes. Not luck. Salvation through trust earned and finally given, though nearly too late. Wade left 30 minutes later with promises to keep Michael updated on the plea negotiations and trial preparation. The sun had fully risen by then, painting the kitchen in warm gold that should have felt comforting but instead highlighted every place Bianca had stood, every surface she'd touched while planning abduction. Michael spent the day cleaning, not the crime scene contamination which a professional service would handle, but the psychological residue. He scrubbed counters Bianca had prepared food on, washed dishes she'd used, opened windows to air out the smell of her presence. Ella woke around 9 and joined him, more interested in playing with Rex than understanding why Daddy was cleaning with such focused intensity. The pediatrician called at 10:15 with final blood work results confirming the benzodiazepines were clearing Ella's system normally, no lasting damage, full recovery expected. Small mercy in a situation with precious few of them. Wade left 30 minutes later with promises to keep Michael updated on the plea negotiations and trial preparation. The sun had fully risen by then, painting the kitchen in warm gold that should have felt comforting but instead highlighted every place Bianca had stood, every surface she'd touched while planning abduction. Michael spent the day cleaning, not the crime scene contamination which a professional service would handle, but the psychological residue. He scrubbed counters Bianca had prepared food on, washed dishes she'd used, opened windows to air out the smell of her presence. Ella woke around 9 and joined him, more interested in playing with Rex than understanding why Daddy was cleaning with such focused intensity. The pediatrician called at 10:15 with final blood work results confirming the benzodiazepines were clearing Ella's system normally, no lasting damage, full recovery expected. Small mercy in a situation with precious few of them. By noon, Michael had made a decision. He contacted a single-parent support group that met weekly at the community center. He'd avoided joining after Rebecca died, unwilling to admit he needed help, unwilling to expose his struggles to strangers. That reluctance had nearly cost him his daughter. He wasn't making the same mistake twice. The group met that Thursday evening. 12 parents in various stages of survival. Widowed, divorced, some with partners deployed or incarcerated. Michael told his story with Rex lying at his feet, told it without minimizing his failures or rationalizing his missed warnings. Told it as a cautionary tale about what happens when desperation for help overrides instinct and vigilance. When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Then a woman named Patricia spoke up. I hired a nanny last month. She seemed perfect, but my cat hates her. Hisses every time she comes near. She paused, looking at Rex. I thought the cat was just being territorial. Michael met her eyes. Get her background checked. Not through the agency she came from, do an independent verification. And trust your cat. The conversation shifted then, became a collective examination of warning signs ignored and red flags rationalized. Michael shared Detective Wade's contact information, offered to connect people with Sarah Chen for toxicology testing if they had concerns about medication or supplements their caregivers were giving children. By the time the meeting ended, 3 parents had committed to running deeper background checks on their nannies, and 2 were scheduling medical evaluations for children who'd shown unexplained drowsiness. Over the following weeks, Michael's transformation became visible not just to himself but to everyone around him. He joined Wade and a local parents' advocacy group in drafting proposed legislation for stronger nanny screening requirements, mandatory fingerprinting, cross-state criminal record checks, psychological evaluations for anyone working with children. The bill had a long path ahead, but Wade thought it had a real chance of passing given the publicity around Bianca's case. Michael took Ella to play therapy twice a week, working with a child psychologist to address any trauma from the drugging incidents even though Ella seemed remarkably resilient. Better to process it now, the therapist said, than have it emerge as anxiety or trust issues years later. And every evening after Ella was in bed, Michael sat with Rex in the living room and ran his hands through the dog's fur while speaking words that needed to be said even if Rex couldn't understand their full meaning. You saved her life. You tried to tell me for 3 months and I didn't listen. But you never stopped trying. Never gave up on protecting her even when I doubted you. Rex would lean into the touch, tail thumping softly, his presence a reminder that some forms of love were vigilant rather than blind, protective rather than permissive. The kind of love that refused to ignore danger just because acknowledging it was uncomfortable. 6 weeks after Bianca's arrest, Wade called with final news. She accepted the plea deal. 15 years minimum, 20 years maximum depending on behavior. She'll be eligible for parole after 12, but given the nature of the crimes, the parole board isn't likely to be sympathetic. She also gave us information on 2 other families from her time in Arizona before Ella Marie died. We're following up, but it looks like the pattern goes back at least 3 years. 3 years of finding children who matched her deceased daughter, inserting herself into their lives, drugging them to create compliant behavior while planning abduction. Michael had been target number 5 or 6 in a long line of families Bianca had victimized. The only difference was Rex, the single variable that had disrupted her pattern and saved not just Ella but potentially dozens of future targets. The nanny agency that had placed Bianca shut down amid investigations into their screening failures. 2 other agencies in the state voluntarily upgraded their background check protocols. Bianca's case became a cautionary tale in childcare provider training programs across New England. Small consolations. Small victories in a situation defined by near tragedy. But on a sunny Saturday afternoon in late October, with fall colors painting the trees in their backyard brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Michael stood on the back deck watching Ella and Rex play a game of fetch that mostly involved Ella throwing the ball 3 feet and Rex retrieving it with exaggerated gentleness, his tail wagging with pure joy. Ella giggled as Rex dropped the ball at her feet and waited with perfect patience for her to pick it up and throw again. The dog's entire body language radiated contentment and purpose. This was what he'd been trying to protect all along. Not an abstract concept of family or duty, but this specific child with her laughter and innocence and absolute trust that the world was safe because Rex and Daddy kept watch. Michael felt something shift in his chest. Not healing exactly, the guilt and self-recrimination would probably never fully fade, but acceptance. Acceptance that he'd failed to see the danger until almost too late. Acceptance that grief and loneliness had compromised his judgment. Acceptance that he needed others, both human and canine, to help him protect what mattered most. And gratitude. Overwhelming gratitude for the retired canine who'd been trained to detect threats and had refused to ignore his training even when his handler dismissed every warning. Rex barked once. Not a warning, not an alert, just pure expression of joy in the moment. Ella squealed and threw the ball again, her coordination fully recovered from months of sedative exposure, her spirit undamaged by trauma she'd been too young to fully understand. Michael's phone buzzed. A text from his sister, coming by tomorrow with the kids. Want to meet the famous hero dog. Also bringing dinner because I know you still can't cook. He smiled and typed back a response, then put the phone away and walked down into the yard. Ella ran to him immediately, wrapping her arms around his legs in a fierce hug that nearly knocked him over. Daddy, watch. Rex is so good at catch. I see that, sweetheart. He's very good. Rex trotted over, ball in mouth, and sat at Michael's feet with perfect discipline. Michael took the ball and threw it long, watched the German Shepherd bound across the grass with the athletic grace of an animal in his prime, watched him return and drop the ball at Ella's feet instead of his own because Rex understood exactly who needed his gentle patience most. This was what trust looked like, Michael realized. Not blind faith that everyone meant well. Not desperate hope that help would come without cost or complication. But clear-eyed recognition of who had earned trust through consistent action and unwavering dedication. Rex had earned it. Earned it by refusing to ignore danger even when dismissed and doubted. Earned it by intervening with perfect precision when intervention became necessary. Earned it by maintaining his vigil through 3 months of warnings and 3 days of quarantine and every moment since, never wavering in his commitment to protecting the small human he'd been charged with guarding. Good boy, Rex, Michael said, crouching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. Good boy. Ella pressed against his side, one small hand on Rex's back, the 3 of them forming a unit that had been tested and nearly broken but had ultimately held because one member refused to fail even when the others couldn't see what needed to be seen. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass. Somewhere in a county jail, Bianca Ruiz sat in a cell contemplating 15 to 20 years of consequences for her obsession and delusion. Somewhere in Massachusetts, other families were having their children tested for benzodiazepine exposure and running deeper background checks on caregivers and learning to trust the warnings of pets who saw what humans missed. But here in this backyard, in this moment of fall sunlight and children's laughter and a dog's joy, Michael felt something he hadn't felt since Rebecca died. Not the false safety of comfortable lies and rationalized warnings. Not the desperate safety of hoping everything would work out despite evidence to the contrary. But genuine safety built on vigilant protection and earned trust and the willingness to see the world as it truly was, dangerous and beautiful, threatening and precious, requiring constant attention from those who loved enough to refuse to look away. Rex barked again, that sound of pure contentment, and Ella threw the ball one more time into the golden afternoon light. Michael watched them play, guardian and protected, trust earned and freely given, and finally, after months of guilt and self-recrimination, allowed himself to believe what Detective Wade had tried to tell him weeks ago. He couldn't have known. The predator had been too skilled at deception. But he had learned. Had transformed his failure into action, his near tragedy into advocacy, his belated trust into a foundation for protecting not just his own daughter but other families who might face similar threats. And most importantly, he'd learned to trust the ones who'd proven through action rather than words that their loyalty was absolute and their vigilance unwavering. Sometimes salvation came from unexpected sources. Sometimes it wore fur and had amber eyes and spoke in a language humans had to learn to understand. Sometimes it refused to give up on protecting the innocent even when no one believed the danger was real. Michael had learned to listen. Finally, completely, without rationalization or doubt. And in that listening, he'd found not just safety but the possibility of genuine healing. For himself, for Ella, and for the family they were rebuilding one day at a time, one warning trusted, one protection offered and gratefully accepted. Rex's tail wagged in the afternoon sun and Michael smiled. The guardian had done his work. The family was whole. And the future, for the first time in longer than Michael could remember, looked not just survivable but bright. Before you scroll past this video, I need you to ask yourself something. Would you have trusted your instincts if your dog had been trying to warn you? Would you have listened before it was too late? Michael didn't. And his daughter almost paid the price. Right now, there's a parent watching this who has a nanny, a babysitter, or a caregiver they're not 100% sure about. Maybe their dog acts strange around them. Maybe their cat hisses. Maybe something just feels off. But they're ignoring it because they need the help. Because they want to believe everything is fine. If you don't hit that subscribe button and share this story, that parent might never see it. They might never know that their instincts are trying to save their child's life. They might miss the warning signs until it's too late, just like Michael almost did. Your subscription isn't just a number. It's a parent who gets this story in their feed. It's a child who gets protected because someone recognized the pattern. It's a life saved because you took 3 seconds to click a button. So subscribe. Like this video so YouTube shows it to more parents who need to see it. And comment below. Tell me, has your pet ever tried to warn you about someone? Have you ever ignored a gut feeling you shouldn't have? Your story could be the one that saves someone else's child. Don't scroll past. Don't assume someone else will share it. Rex couldn't speak in words, but he never gave up trying to communicate. Be the voice that makes sure other families hear this warning before it's too late. Subscribe now. Their children are counting on you.